You have arrived here at the end of another day, perhaps looking for something calm, something slow. Tonight we are going to settle into a different kind of shelter. Not a house, not a hotel, an RV parked somewhere remote. As the first snow of a winter storm begins to fall, the light outside is fading, the temperature is dropping. Inside this small space, maybe 30 feet long, maybe less, someone is preparing for the night ahead, checking systems, adjusting thermostats. Layering blankets on a bed barely wider than their shoulders. This is not about survival in the wilderness. It is not about emergency or disaster. This is about people who choose to sleep in RVs during winter, who travel through snow and cold by deliberate decision, and who have learned to create warmth and rest in spaces measured in dozens of square feet rather than hundreds. The storm will arrive fully in a few hours. The wind will pick up. Snow will accumulate on the roof and against the walls. And inside, in a space so small you could touch both sides at once, someone will sleep comfortably. We are going to explore how that happens, how propane furnaces cycle through the night, how condensation forms and is managed, how layers of fabric substitute for thick walls, how sleep arrives despite wind rocking the frame and cold pressing against thin windows. Settle in. Let this unfold slowly. There is no rush. The snow is just beginning. Most RVs travel south when temperatures drop. This is documented and predictable. Between 1 and 3 million Americans participate in seasonal RV migration, and the majority head toward warmth, Arizona, Texas, Florida, seeking sun and 70-degree days. This is the snowbird pattern, well established and widely understood, but not everyone follows that route. Some RV travelers deliberately turn north when winter approaches. They seek out snow-covered national parks, mountain destinations, frozen lakes, and landscapes emptied of summer crowds. They position themselves near ski resorts, in national forests dusted white, along roads that require chains and careful driving. They are not fleeing winter, they are pursuing it. The reasons vary, but they are specific. For some, it is about access. Winter resorts need workers, lift operators, kitchen staff, retail employees, and RVs provide affordable housing near seasonal jobs. Others are photographers or outdoor enthusiasts who want proximity to activities only available in cold months. Skiing, snowshoeing. The particular quality of light that exists only when sun reflects off snow. For others, it is about solitude. Summer campgrounds fill with families, generators, noise. Winter campgrounds sit nearly empty. The silence is measurable. The crowds are gone. What was busy in July becomes almost meditative in January. Then there are those for whom winter travel is not a choice in the traditional sense. Full-time RV residents, a growing demographic, verified by industry data, do not have the option to simply stop traveling when weather turns cold. They live in their vehicles year-round. Winter is not avoided, it is managed. The appeal is not universal. Winter RV travel presents legitimate challenges: frozen water systems, propane consumption, difficult road conditions, the constant negotiation with cold. But for those who engage with it, the difficulties become part of the experience rather than obstacles to overcome. There is something about creating warmth in a small space while surrounded by cold. About watching snow fall from inside a lit window. About waking to a landscape transformed overnight. The contrast becomes meaningful. The vulnerability of thin walls makes the achieved comfort more conscious, more appreciated. This is not about extremism or proving toughness. Most winter RV travelers are not mountaineers or adventurers in the dramatic sense. They are retirees, remote workers, seasonal employees, photographers, people who have simply learned that comfort can be created in small spaces during cold months, and that the rewards, visual, experiential, practical, justify the effort required. The freedom matters too. Year-round travel means not being constrained by seasons. It means accessing places at their quietest. It means developing competence in managing systems and conditions. For many, the ability to sleep comfortably through a snowstorm in a space the size of a walk-in closet represents a particular kind of self-sufficiency that feels increasingly rare. National parks in winter become different places. Yellowstone under snow, Yosemite's valleys frosted and quiet, the Grand Canyon rimmed with ice. These landscapes exist in summer, but they transform in winter. Fewer visitors, different light, a stillness that summer crowds prevent. RV travelers who master cold weather sleep gain access to these versions of places. The nights are longer in winter. Darkness arrives early. This creates more time spent inside, more hours in sleeping spaces, more emphasis on how those spaces function and feel. Getting the nighttime equation right, warmth, comfort, air quality, sound, becomes essential rather than incidental. Winter RV travel is not for everyone, but for those who engage with it, the experience becomes something more than simple transportation and shelter. It becomes a practice, a set of skills, a way of engaging with landscapes and seasons that most people only observe from heated homes or avoid entirely. The appeal is quiet, but persistent. It shows up in online forums, in campground conversations, in the steady growth of four-season RV sales. People who try it once often return. The challenges remain, but they become familiar. The solutions become routines, and the nights, long, cold, dark, become something anticipated rather than endured. The decision about where to park for the night begins hours before darkness. This is not casual. In summer, a traveler might pull into a campground at dusk, set up quickly, and sleep without much thought. Winter does not allow that approach. Location matters in specific, measurable ways. Wind is the first consideration. An RV presents a large surface area to moving air. Even a well-insulated RV loses heat rapidly when wind presses constantly against its walls. A campsite protected by trees, hillsides, or structures reduces this heat loss significantly. Experienced winter travelers look for natural windbreaks before they look for views. The difference is not subtle. An RV parked in an open field during a windstorm requires constant furnace operation to maintain interior warmth. The same RV parked in a grove of evergreens requires less frequent heating cycles. Propane consumption drops. Interior temperature holds steadier. Sleep quality improves because the furnace runs less often. Sun exposure matters for the hours before sleep. A site that receives afternoon sun warms the RV's interior passively, reducing the heating burden once darkness falls. South-facing positions are preferred when possible. The thermal mass of the RV, limited though it is, absorbs available warmth during daylight and releases it slowly through early evening. Level ground is not about comfort, it is about systems. RV refrigerators, common propane absorption models require level positioning to function properly. Water systems, even winterized ones, drain better on level ground. And furnaces, particularly older models, may not operate correctly if tilted beyond certain angles. What looks like a minor slope can create problems that emerge at 2 in the morning. The choice between campgrounds and remote locations represents different calculations. Campgrounds in winter often provide electrical hookups, allowing use of space heaters that supplement or replace propane furnaces. They provide plowed roads, nearby facilities, and proximity to other people if problems arise. But they cost money and reduce solitude. Remote camping, called boondocking in RV communities, eliminates fees and crowds but demands complete self-sufficiency. No electrical hookups mean relying entirely on propane and battery power. No plowed roads mean potential inability to leave if snow accumulates. No neighbors mean no help if systems fail. Both approaches work. The choice depends on equipment, experience level, and weather severity. A traveler in a well-equipped four-season RV with dual propane tanks and a robust battery bank might prefer remote locations. Someone in a lighter RV with minimal cold weather preparation might choose campgrounds with full hookups. Neither approach is inherently better. They are different tools for different situations. Weather forecasts become essential reading. Not just current conditions, but predicted overnight lows, wind speeds, and snowfall amounts. A storm expected to bring 2 inches of snow is managed differently than one bringing 12 inches. Wind chills below zero require different preparation than calm. Nights at 20 degrees. Proximity to services matters more in winter than summer. A campsite 30 miles from the nearest town is manageable in July. In January, if weather worsens or equipment fails, that distance becomes significant. Many winter RV travelers position themselves within reasonable reach of propane refills, grocery stores, and repair facilities, even when seeking solitude. Cell phone coverage enters the calculation, not for entertainment, but for weather updates and emergency contactability. A remote site without coverage increases risk if conditions deteriorate. Some travelers carry satellite communication devices, others simply avoid areas where help cannot be summoned if needed. Arrival time matters. Setting up camp, connecting utilities if available, checking systems, and preparing for the night all take longer in cold weather. Fingers stiffen, connections freeze. Tasks that take minutes in summer take longer in winter. Arriving with daylight remaining is not a preference. It is a practical requirement. The accumulation of these considerations means that winter campsite selection becomes a practice skill rather than a casual choice. Experienced travelers develop instincts. They read terrain for wind protection. They assess tree density for shelter versus snow load risk. They position vehicles with door sides away from prevailing winds. They think through morning sun exposure and afternoon shade patterns. None of this is dramatic. It is simply careful. The goal is not adventure or challenge. The goal is comfortable sleep through cold nights. And that begins with choosing, hours before darkness, the right piece of ground to occupy until morning. The selection of a sleeping location begins hours before darkness. In summer, RV travelers might pull into a campsite at dusk, level the vehicle, and settle in without much consideration. Winter removes that flexibility. Where the RV sits when the sun goes down determines how well its occupants will sleep when snow begins to fall. Experienced winter travelers read terrain differently than summer campers. They look for natural windbreaks, a line of dense evergreens to the north and west, a hillside that blocks prevailing winds, a depression in the landscape that offers shelter without becoming a cold air sink. Wind matters more than most people anticipate. An RV heated to 70 degrees inside can feel cold and drafty when wind strips heat from thin walls, faster than the furnace replaces it. The heating system runs constantly. Propane consumption increases. The sound changes from rhythmic cycling to continuous operation. Sleep becomes harder in a space that never quite reaches comfortable stillness. Trees provide more than wind protection. They create acoustic barriers. The rush of wind through pine branches replaces the hollow sound of air hitting flat RV walls. Many winter campers report sleeping better surrounded by forest, not despite the sound of wind in trees, but because of it. The noise feels natural rather than mechanical. It obscures the small creaks and flexes that occur when aluminum and fiberglass contract in cold. Level ground serves purposes beyond avoiding rolling sensations during the night. RV furnaces require proper positioning to function efficiently. Refrigerators running on propane need level operation. Water systems, even winterized ones, drain more completely on level surfaces. Some experienced travelers carry leveling blocks and spend 20 minutes achieving perfect placement rather than accepting a site that slopes. The effort pays dividends in system performance through the night. Sun exposure during the day determines interior temperature at nightfall. An RV parked in full southern exposure absorbs solar heat through windows and a roof. Even in freezing air temperatures, a closed RV in direct sun can reach 70 or 80 degrees inside by mid-afternoon. That stored heat lingers into evening. The furnace needs less fuel to maintain comfort through the first hours of night. Some travelers deliberately position their RV to maximize morning sun exposure as well, knowing that waking to natural warmth reduces the harsh transition from sleep to cold morning activity. The decision between established campgrounds and remote dispersed camping shapes the entire sleeping experience. Campgrounds offer proximity to other travelers, plowed roads, sometimes heated restroom facilities, the knowledge that help exists nearby if something fails. These factors reduce anxiety. Sleep comes easier when the consequences of system failure feel manageable rather than dangerous. Dispersed camping on public lands offers something campgrounds cannot provide: complete silence except for wind and snow. Darkness uninterrupted by neighboring lights, the particular satisfaction of self-sufficiency, but it demands confidence in systems and preparation. A furnace failure at a campground means walking to a heated building or knocking on a neighbor's door. The same failure in remote dispersed camping means managing cold until morning with only the resources inside the RV. Many winter travelers follow a pattern. They spend their first winter nights at campgrounds, testing systems and building confidence. Only after proving their setup through several cold nights do they venture into isolated locations. Elevation matters. Cold air sinks. A campsite at the bottom of a valley can be 10 or 15 degrees colder than a site 100 feet higher on a slope. But valley floors often offer better wind protection. The choice becomes a negotiation between competing factors. Some travelers prefer valley stillness and compensate with extra heating. Others choose exposed slopes for warmer air and rely on windbreaks to manage buffeting. Proximity to the truck stop or town factors into decisions as well, not for entertainment, but for resource access. A campsite 30 miles from the nearest services feels different when snow begins to accumulate. The knowledge that resupply would require driving through a storm, possibly for hours, shapes preparation intensity. Travelers in these isolated positions check propane levels twice. They bring extra food. They prepare as though they might remain in place for days rather than planning to leave the next morning. The ground surface itself influences overnight comfort. Snow-covered grass provides some insulation between frozen earth and the RV floor. Gravel or bare dirt conducts cold more efficiently. Experienced winter campers sometimes shovel snow under their RV deliberately, creating an insulating layer between the ground and the living space above. Others avoid this because melting and refreezing can create ice buildup that complicates departure. Each approach reflects different priorities in the negotiation between warmth and mobility. Cell phone signal availability changes the psychological experience of remote winter camping. A site with reliable signal feels less isolated, even when visually identical to a site without service. The ability to check weather updates through the night or call for help if needed provides security that affects sleep quality. Many winter travelers test signal strength before committing to a site for the night, understanding that this invisible resource matters as much as physical shelter. The timing of site selection matters as much as the choice itself. Arriving with 2 hours of daylight remaining allows full setup, system checks, and adjustments before darkness. Arriving at dusk forces rushed decisions and incomplete preparation. Winter RV travelers learn to stop early, even when the destination lies only another hour down the road. That extra hour of setup time translates to better sleep quality and fewer midnight problems requiring attention in the cold and dark. The choice between electrical hookup and self-sufficient camping determines not just convenience, but the fundamental nature of overnight heating and sleep. An RV plugged into shore power operates differently than one relying entirely on internal systems. The sleeping experience diverges from this single decision made hours before bed. Electrical hookups provide access to power that enables supplemental heating without consuming propane. A small electric space heater can maintain bedroom temperature through the night while drawing from the campground grid, rather than internal fuel supplies. The propane furnace either runs less frequently or serves as backup rather than primary heat source. This arrangement appeals to travelers who spend weeks or months in winter locations. Propane consumption drops significantly. Refill trips become less frequent. The mental calculation of remaining fuel, always present during cold nights, fades into background, rather than demanding constant attention. Electric heat changes the acoustic environment of sleep as well. Space heaters produce steady white noise rather than the cycling pattern of propane furnaces. Some travelers find this preferable. The constant low hum replaces the pattern of ignition, fan operation, thermostat click, silence, then repetition. Others miss the familiar rhythm of propane heat. The sound of the furnace cycling has become associated with warmth and safety. Its absence feels wrong even when temperature remains comfortable. Shore power enables heated mattress pads and electric blankets without concern for battery depletion. These supplemental heat sources provide targeted warmth exactly where sleep happens. The RV interior can remain cooler. Air temperature that might feel uncomfortable for sitting and reading becomes acceptable when the bed itself radiates heat. Some winter campers maintain their living space at 60 degrees but sleep comfortably under electric blankets, appreciating the cool air for breathing while remaining warm beneath layers. The availability of unlimited electricity shifts preparation priorities. Water heaters can run continuously rather than strategically. Lights stay on without battery mathematics. Small heating fans can operate in bathroom or storage areas to prevent freezing in peripheral spaces. The mental load of resource management decreases. Sleep comes easier when the only concern is comfort rather than consumption. But electrical hookups carry limitations and dependencies. Campground power sometimes fails during winter storms. Heavy snow or ice takes down lines. Wind damages infrastructure. Travelers who rely entirely on electric heat without maintaining propane systems face sudden vulnerability when power disappears at midnight. The cold becomes immediate. Temperatures inside the RV drop quickly without active heating. Scrambling to activate backup propane systems in the dark, in the cold, creates exactly the kind of disrupted sleep that preparation aims to avoid. Hookup sites cost more than dispersed camping. The price difference ranges from $15 to $50 per night, depending on location and season. Over weeks or months, this becomes significant. Some winter travelers accept the expense as worthwhile for consistent heating and reduced fuel costs. Others view the premium as money better spent on fuel and supplies, preferring the independence of boondocking despite its demands. Campground sites with hookups rarely offer the isolation and quiet of dispersed locations. Neighboring RVs sit close. Generator noise from units without hookups carries through cold air. Lights from other campers penetrate windows. The sounds of people living, conversations closing doors, footsteps on frozen ground replace natural silence. For travelers seeking winter camping specifically for solitude and quietness, hookups provide comfort at the expense of the experience they came to find. Boondocking without electrical connection demands different preparation and creates different sleeping conditions. Every watt of power comes from batteries recharged by solar panels, generator operation, or vehicle alternator. Heating draws propane from tanks that must be monitored and refilled. The RV becomes a closed system. What you brought with you determines what you have available through the night. This self-sufficiency focuses attention on resource management in ways that shape evening routines and sleep psychology. Propane gauge checks become habit. Travelers calculate hours of heating fuel remaining against forecast overnight temperatures. They adjust thermostats downward and add blanket layers to stretch fuel supplies. The negotiation between comfort and conservation never fully disappears from awareness. Battery capacity limits electric blanket use during boondocking. Running heated bedding through the night can deplete batteries below safe levels, preventing furnace ignition or water pump operation in the morning. Most boondocking winter campers either avoid electric bedding entirely or use it briefly for initial warming before sleep, then rely on passive insulation through the night. The isolation of dispersed winter camping creates psychological conditions that affect sleep quality in individual ways. Some people rest better knowing no neighbors exist nearby. The darkness feels complete. Snow falling makes the only sound. The experience approaches the immersive quietness many seek specifically. Others find the isolation anxiety-producing. The awareness that help requires hours rather than minutes to arrive maintains subtle tension. Every unusual sound demands attention. The mind remains partially vigilant rather than fully releasing into rest. Weather monitoring becomes more critical when boondocked in remote locations. A storm that would simply mean staying inside at a developed campground can create serious problems in dispersed camping. Access roads become impassable. Exit might require waiting days for plowing or thaw. Travelers in these situations watch forecasts carefully and make decisions about whether to relocate before snow arrives or commit to remaining in place through whatever develops. Many experienced winter RVRs develop hybrid approaches. They use hookup sites during the coldest periods or largest storms, accepting the proximity to others and financial cost in exchange for heating security and reduced system stress. Between major weather events, they move to dispersed locations, appreciating the quiet and self-sufficiency their systems enable. The pattern reflects recognition that different conditions call for different strategies rather than dogmatic commitment to one approach. The choice also reflects individual sleeping preferences developed through experience. Some people simply rest better with the security of shore power and nearby help. Others sleep more deeply in isolation, despite or because of the demands it places on preparation and systems. Neither approach indicates greater skill or authenticity. Both represent valid ways of creating comfortable sleep in winter conditions. The important factor is honest assessment of what enables rest, rather than what seems more adventurous or economical in theory. The walls of an RV are not the walls of a house. They appear solid from inside. Paneling covers them. Cabinets mount to them. They define the space and create the feeling of enclosure. But between the interior surface and the exterior aluminum skin, there is often just 1 to 3 inches of insulation. Sometimes less. This is not a flaw, it is a design compromise. RVs must remain light enough to tow or drive. They must be built quickly and affordably. And for decades, most were intended for summer vacations and warm weather retirement migration. Insulation sufficient to keep out heat during a July afternoon in Arizona was considered adequate. The idea that someone would sleep in one during a January snowstorm was secondary. The term four-season RV exists. It appears in marketing materials and manufacturer specifications. But it is not regulated. One company's four-season model may have thicker insulation, heated holding tanks, and thermal windows. Another's may simply have a larger propane furnace to compensate for heat loss. The label promises winter capability without defining what that means. Buyers learn the truth during their first cold night. Windows present the greatest challenge. Glass conducts cold efficiently. Most RV windows are single pane, or double pane assemblies far thinner than residential windows. They sit in aluminum frames that themselves conduct cold. On a night when outside temperatures drop to 20 degrees, the interior surface of a window may register 40 degrees. The cold radiates inward. Anyone sleeping near a window feels it, even under blankets. Floors receive even less insulation than walls. Beneath the interior flooring, often thin plywood covered with vinyl or carpet, there may be only a thin layer of foam or fiberglass. Below that, a thin underbelly material separates the interior from the outside air. When an RV sits on frozen ground, cold moves upward through this assembly. Feet feel it first. Then the cold spreads through the entire sleeping space, settling low where warm air from furnaces cannot easily push it out. The ceiling fares slightly better. Heat rises, so the warmest air in an RV collects at the top. But the roof itself is a large, exposed surface. Snow landing on it provides some insulation. Before snow arrives, the roof radiates heat into the night sky. The thermal barrier between inside and outside remains minimal. Four-season RVs address some of these limitations. Manufacturers add thicker wall insulation. They install heated underbelly enclosures to protect holding tanks and create a warmer floor. They use better windows. They insulate around slide-outs, sections that expand outward to create more interior space, but often leak heat where they seal. These improvements help. They do not transform an RV into a house. Even the best insulated RV remains a thin-walled box. Stand inside one during a winter storm and place your hand against the wall. The cold presses through. The wind outside becomes palpable inside. Temperature differentials that would be invisible in a traditional home become immediate and physical. This reality shapes every winter night. Travelers cannot simply set a thermostat to 70 degrees and forget about temperature. Heat escapes continuously. Furnaces must run repeatedly to replace it. Propane consumption increases, battery power drains faster. The entire sleeping environment exists in constant negotiation between the heat being generated inside and the cold pressing in from outside. Some travelers seal windows with insulated coverings. Reflective bubble wrap adheres to glass, creating dead air space. Custom-fitted fabric panels mount with Velcro or magnetic strips. These barriers reduce heat loss measurably. They also block light and views, making the interior feel more enclosed. The choice between seeing outside and retaining warmth becomes part of the evening preparation. Floors require different solutions. Rugs provide slight insulation and make cold surfaces more tolerable underfoot. Some travelers place foam mats beneath sleeping areas. Others install rigid foam insulation panels under the RV itself, creating an additional barrier between interior and frozen ground. In extreme cold, these measures shift conditions from uncomfortable to tolerable, rather than from cold to warm. The gaps and seams in RV construction matter more in winter than summer. A small opening that allows hot air to escape in July becomes a cold draft entry point in January. Around windows, through cable and plumbing penetrations where slide-outs seal, cold air finds its way inside. Travelers learn where their specific RV leaks by noting where frost forms and where they feel moving air while lying in bed. None of this makes winter RV sleeping impossible. It makes it different. The experience requires acknowledgement that the shelter is minimal. The walls exist, but they are thin. The windows seal, but they conduct cold. The floor provides separation from the ground, but not thermal protection. Understanding these limitations allows realistic preparation rather than disappointment when reality arrives with the first cold night. Some people find this transparency appealing. The thin walls create immediate connection to outside conditions. Temperature changes register quickly. Wind becomes audible. Snow sounds amplified. The barrier between inside and outside exists, but it remains permeable to sensation. This intimacy with weather would be impossible in a well-insulated house. Others work continuously to improve insulation, adding materials and barriers wherever possible, attempting to transform the RV into something closer to traditional shelter. Both approaches succeed. Both create comfortable sleep. The first accepts the RV's nature and adapts to it. The second modifies the RV to behave differently. Both groups sleep through winter nights, kept warm not by the walls alone, but by the systems and strategies they layer within and around those walls. The walls of an RV remain thin. This does not change. What changes is how travelers work within that reality to create warmth sufficient for rest. The furnace sits somewhere in the underbelly or in a lower cabinet. Its exact location varies by RV model, but its presence defines every winter night. When the thermostat calls for heat, the furnace answers. This exchange repeats dozens of times between sunset and sunrise. The ignition sequence begins with a click. The gas valve opens. The igniter sparks. A soft whoomp announces successful combustion. The blower motor starts, building from low hum to steady rush. Warm air begins flowing through metal ducts to registers positioned throughout the interior. The sound fills the space. For perhaps 3 to 8 minutes, the furnace runs. Then it achieves the thermostat setting. The flame extinguishes. The blower continues briefly, clearing residual heat from the combustion chamber. Then silence returns. 15 minutes pass, 20, 30. The heat that entered the space disperses. Much of it escapes through thin walls and windows. Interior temperature drops below the thermostat setting. The sequence begins again. Click, whump, rush of air, silence. This rhythm continues until morning. Propane provides the fuel. A molecule burns, releasing heat and producing water vapor and carbon dioxide as byproducts. The furnace vents combustion gases outside through dedicated exhaust, but the heat it produces contains less moisture than other heating methods. The air flowing from registers feels dry. It warms skin quickly. It also dries nasal passages and throats over the course of a night. The sound of forced air movement is not subtle. In a small RV, perhaps 20 to 30 feet long, the distance from furnace to sleeping area may be only a few feet. The registers often open directly into the living space without intervening walls. When the blower runs, the sound dominates the environment. White noise, mechanical, steady. Some people find it intolerable initially. Most adapt. Many come to find it reassuring. The reassurance is practical. A running furnace means propane is flowing. The igniter is functioning. The system is maintaining temperature. Each cycle confirms that warmth will continue. In a thin-walled box surrounded by cold, this confirmation matters. The sound becomes associated with safety rather than disturbance. Sleep happens between cycles and during them. Furnace placement affects how heat distributes. In many RVs, the furnace sits near the center or front, while the bedroom occupies the rear. Warm air must travel through ducts and registers to reach sleeping areas. Some heat escapes along the way. Bedrooms often run several degrees cooler than main living spaces. This temperature gradient shapes where people position themselves and how they dress for sleep. The dry heat creates specific physical sensations. Skin feels it first, warmth arriving quickly, moisture leaving slowly. After several hours, lips may chap, throats feel parched. Some travelers wake multiple times to drink water. Others run small humidifiers when electrical power allows, attempting to return moisture to air that propane heating has dried. Without intervention, the air inside a propane-heated RV in winter can drop to humidity levels lower than most deserts. The thermostat setting becomes a nightly decision. Set it at 68 degrees and the furnace runs frequently. Set it at 60 and cycles become less common, but the ambient temperature requires more bedding. Set it at 55 and the furnace runs only enough to prevent freezing, demanding sleeping bags and heavy layers. Each strategy works. Each creates a different experience of the night. Some travelers leave the furnace at a consistent temperature and sleep with lighter blankets. They value uninterrupted ambient warmth. They tolerate more propane consumption and more frequent cycling sounds. Others turn the thermostat down significantly and rely on bedding for insulation. They accept cold air on their faces but reduce fuel use and system noise. Neither approach is correct. Both respond to individual preference and available resources. Propane consumption matters. A typical RV furnace may consume between 1/3 and 1 gallon of propane per night, depending on outside temperature. Insulation quality, thermostat setting, and furnace efficiency. An RV might carry between 20 and 40 gallons of propane in onboard tanks. Winter heating can deplete those reserves in days or weeks, rather than months. The math is simple, but consequential. Running out of propane means losing heat. Awareness of remaining fuel hovers in background consciousness through every cold night. The furnace's combustion chamber requires outside air for burning and exhausts combustion byproducts outside. This design prevents carbon monoxide buildup inside the living space. It makes furnaces safer than older catalytic heaters or open flame heating systems. But it also means the furnace pulls cold air from outside, heats it, and distributes it inside. It must work against continuous temperature differential rather than simply maintaining stable warmth. Routine maintenance shapes reliability. Furnaces need clean burner assemblies, functional igniters, unobstructed vents, and charged batteries to run control boards and blowers. A furnace that worked perfectly in October may fail in December if dust accumulated, propane lines developed leaks, or battery voltage dropped. Pre-winter testing matters. So does carrying spare igniters and knowing how to access the furnace compartment for field repairs. When a furnace fails at night, the temperature inside drops quickly. Thin insulation cannot hold residual warmth. Within an hour, interior temperature may fall 20 degrees or more. Backup heating becomes necessary. Catalytic heaters if available, electric space heaters if shore power exists, or simply relying on cold weather bedding and waiting for morning to troubleshoot. This possibility shapes preparation. The furnace is primary, but it cannot be the only plan. Between cycles, silence settles. The absence of mechanical sound makes other sounds more apparent. Wind against walls, snow on the roof, breathing, then the click, the whump, the rush of warm air returning. The cycle resumes. This pattern structures time differently than continuous heating. Rather than static warmth, there is rhythmic warmth. Rather than silence or constant noise, there is alternation between the two. The furnace's warm air smells faintly of heated metal and dust. The scent is more noticeable during the first cycles of evening than in the middle of the night, when noses adapt. It is neither pleasant nor unpleasant. It is mechanical. It signifies function. In the context of cold darkness outside, function carries its own appeal. The furnace does not care about comfort. It responds to temperature differentials and electrical signals from the thermostat. It operates until propane or battery power depletes or a component fails. The warmth it provides is transactional, not generous. But in the accumulation of cycles through a long winter night, it creates the conditions that allow sleep to happen inside a thin aluminum box, while snow falls steadily outside. Not all winter RV travelers rely on forced air furnaces through the night. The furnace remains the most common heat source, but other systems exist. Each creates a different atmosphere during sleeping hours. Each shapes the night in its own way. Some travelers install catalytic propane heaters as their primary heat source. These devices produce warmth through catalytic combustion rather than flame. The propane passes over a platinum-coated pad. The reaction generates heat without visible fire. Without combustion requiring venting through a flue, the process operates almost silently. The silence matters to sleep quality. A catalytic heater produces no ignition click. No fan motor cycles on and off. No air rushes through metal ducts. The heat radiates outward steadily, like warmth from sunlit stone. Travelers who prefer quiet above all else often choose this system specifically for the sleeping hours. They report sleeping more deeply without mechanical interruption. The warmth simply exists, constant and unannounced. The heat feels different as well. Forced air furnaces create moving warmth, circulating heat through vents. Catalytic heaters produce radiant warmth that heats surfaces and bodies directly rather than heating air first. Objects absorb the infrared radiation. Bedding warms gradually. Walls hold heat longer. The temperature distribution follows different physics. Cold spots still exist. Corners far from the heater, areas blocked by furniture. But the quality of warmth where it reaches feels more substantial, less ephemeral than heated air. These heaters require ventilation despite their efficiency. They consume oxygen from inside the RV. They release moisture as a byproduct of combustion. An unventilated catalytic heater will fog windows heavily and deplete oxygen to uncomfortable levels by morning. Travelers crack a window or roof vent slightly, accepting the small heat loss as necessary. The trade allows them to sleep safely through the night without carbon monoxide risk or suffocating dampness. Diesel heating systems represent a different approach entirely. These systems, Webasto and Espar, manufacture the most common models, burn diesel fuel in a small combustion chamber, completely separate from the living space, the exhaust vents outside. The heat transfers to air that circulates through the RV without ever contacting combustion gases. The efficiency surprises people unfamiliar with the technology. A diesel heater may burn less than a quarter gallon of fuel through an entire winter night. The heat output remains steady and controllable with precision. The thermostat maintains temperature within a degree or two. No propane tanks to monitor and refill. The fuel supply connects to the vehicle's diesel tank or to a separate small tank that requires filling only every few weeks, even in constant use. The sound differs from propane furnaces, but still exists. The heater ticks quietly during operation. A small fan moves air through the heat exchanger. The exhaust pulses softly outside. These sounds are minimal compared to propane furnaces, but not absent. Some sleepers find the gentle mechanical hum soothing. Others prefer complete silence and use the heater to warm the space before bed, then lower the setting or switch it off entirely, relying on residual warmth and insulated bedding through the night. Installation requires more investment than portable heaters. The system mounts permanently. Fuel lines run to the tank. Exhaust and intake ports penetrate the RV exterior. A control panel mounts inside. Most travelers who install diesel heat do so after experiencing winter RV life, with other systems first, then deciding the benefits justify the cost and complexity. When shore power is available at a campground, electric space heaters become possible. Travelers use ceramic heaters, oil-filled radiators, or small electric furnaces. These draw too much power for battery systems, but work well when plugged into campground electricity. Electric heat operates silently. No fuel consumption, no combustion byproducts, no propane to monitor. The heater simply converts electricity to warmth. Oil-filled radiators stay warm for extended periods after shutting off, continuing to release heat gradually. Ceramic heaters respond quickly, raising temperature within minutes when cold air seeps in. Safety considerations shape overnight use. Travelers position heaters away from bedding and fabrics. They avoid running extension cords under rugs or across walking paths. Many use heaters with automatic tip-over shutoff features. Some use timers to cycle heaters on and off rather than running continuously, reducing fire risk while maintaining general warmth. The cost shifts from fuel to electricity. Campground fees usually include power, making electric heat essentially free once the nightly site fee is paid. This appeals to travelers staying in one location for extended periods. The propane supply lasts indefinitely when not needed for heating. Refilling tanks becomes unnecessary for weeks at a time. The atmospheric difference between heat sources becomes most apparent during the hours just before sleep. A forced air furnace announces its presence rhythmically. A catalytic heater warms silently from one location, creating a gradient. A diesel heater hums efficiently in the background. An electric radiator radiates quiet warmth without announcement. Each system creates its own relationship between the sleeper and the machine, maintaining survival temperature. Some travelers want to hear their heat source working, finding reassurance in the sound of active warming. Others prefer mechanical silence, trusting insulation and bedding to supplement quieter heat sources. The choice reflects more than technical preference. It shapes the sensory experience of the entire night. The sounds that accompany breathing and heartbeat, the pattern of temperature fluctuation or steadiness, the routines of checking fuel levels or simply plugging in. Each heating system becomes part of the ritual of preparing for sleep in winter conditions, as familiar as the sleeping space itself. Heat rises, cold settles. This basic physics creates a persistent challenge for winter RV sleep. The warmest air collects near the ceiling. The coldest air pools at floor level. The bed sits inches above that floor. Frozen ground lies inches below. Most RVs were built with minimal floor insulation. A thin layer of foam or fiberglass separates the interior from the undercarriage. Sheet metal or plastic corrugated underbelly panels close the space between floor joists. These panels block wind but conduct cold efficiently. When ground temperature drops below freezing, that cold radiates upward through metal, through minimal insulation, through the floor itself. The bed becomes an island of attempted warmth hovering above a cold mass that steadily draws heat downward. Sleepers feel this in their mattresses. Even with heating systems running and air temperature comfortable, the sleeping surface stays cool. Body heat warms the top of the mattress but cannot overcome the cold rising from below. Lying down means pressing against a surface conducting cold upward from frozen earth. No amount of blankets addresses this. Blankets insulate above the body. The cold comes from beneath. Skirting provides the primary defense. Skirting means enclosing the space beneath the RV, creating a barrier between wind and the undercarriage. The barrier blocks moving air from stripping heat from the underbelly. More importantly, it creates dead air space, stationary air trapped between ground and floor that acts as insulation. Some travelers use commercial RV skirting products. These consist of fabric panels with snaps or zippers designed to attach to the RV's lower edge and extend to the ground. Insulated vinyl or heavy canvas, dark colors to absorb any available solar warmth during daylight. Installation takes an afternoon, removal and storage for summer takes an hour. Others improvise with available materials. Hay bales stacked along the RV's perimeter create effective wind blocks. The hay itself insulates. The air spaces between bales add protection. Snow piled against hay bales adds another layer. This approach costs less than commercial products and decomposes naturally in spring, requiring no storage space. Rigid foam insulation boards cut to fit and propped against the RV's sides provide another option. The boards resist wind better than fabric. They insulate more effectively than hay. They last multiple seasons, but they require storage when not in use, taking space that many RVs cannot spare. Some travelers build snow berms deliberately. After a snowfall, they shovel snow against the RV's lower walls, packing it into a sloped barrier 1 or 2 feet high. Snow contains trapped air. Air insulates. The berm blocks wind from flowing beneath the RV. The effort takes 30 minutes and costs nothing. Additional snowfall adds to the protection rather than requiring removal. These preparations happen during daylight hours, often in the afternoon before temperatures drop. The work becomes meditative. Walking the RV's perimeter, adjusting panels or repositioning hay bales, packing snow with a shovel while daylight fades. The activity itself generates warmth. The result provides peace of mind for the coming night. Inside, travelers address floor cold from above. Thick rugs cover walking areas, adding insulation between bare feet and cold flooring. Some place foam exercise mats or interlocking foam tiles beneath rugs for additional insulation. The foam compresses underfoot but creates an air barrier that reduces cold transfer. The mattress itself receives attention. Memory foam toppers add inches of insulation between body and mattress base. Some travelers place reflective insulation, thin sheets of metallized bubble wrap, beneath mattress toppers. The reflective layer bounces radiant heat back upward rather than allowing it to conduct down into the cold mattress core. Others use electric mattress pads when shore power is available. Actively warming the sleeping surface from below the body. Sleeping bags designed for cold weather provide another layer of defense. A bag rated to 0 degrees placed on top of the mattress creates an insulated envelope. The sleeper lies inside the bag rather than directly on the mattress. The bag's bottom insulation prevents body heat from conducting into the cold sleeping surface. The top insulation prevents heat loss upward. Additional blankets can layer over the bag if needed, but the bag itself addresses the fundamental problem of cold rising from below. These solutions accumulate. Skirting reduces cold beneath the floor. Foam and rugs insulate the floor surface. Mattress toppers and pads create barriers on the bed itself. Sleeping bags provide personal insulation systems. Each layer reduces the rate of heat loss. None eliminate cold entirely, but together they transform a losing battle into manageable equilibrium. The difference becomes obvious during sleep. Without floor protection, feet stay cold, no matter how many blankets pile above. With proper insulation below, warmth becomes achievable. The bed stops feeling like it's drawing heat downward into an infinite cold sink. The sleeping surface stabilizes. Comfort becomes possible. Experienced winter RV travelers assess their floor insulation strategy before assessing their heating strategy. They understand that heating systems fight a futile battle against uninsulated floors. Air heated to 70 degrees rises to the ceiling while cold air remains pooled at floor level. The furnace runs constantly, burning through propane, never quite achieving comfort because heat escapes downward as quickly as it's generated. Proper floor protection changes the equation. The same heating system maintains temperature with less frequent cycling. Propane consumption drops. Temperature stability improves. The sleeping space becomes genuinely warm rather than simply less cold. The preparation required discourages some potential winter travelers. Skirting an RV takes time. Hay bales must be purchased and positioned. Snow berms need rebuilding after major storms. The work is physical and cold, but those who commit to the process discover the effort enables everything else. Without addressing cold from below, no amount of heating or bedding achieves real comfort. With the floor protected, winter RV sleep transforms from endurance into rest. The furnace sits in a compartment beneath the floor, usually somewhere near the center of the RV. When it runs, it pushes warm air through metal ducts and out through vents positioned in the living area, the kitchen, sometimes the bathroom. Heat rises and spreads in the main space, but the bedroom sits at the other end of the vehicle, separated by doors or partitions, and the warm air does not naturally travel there in useful quantities. The result is a geography of temperature zones within 40 feet of living space. The area near the furnace vent stays warm. The kitchen, adjacent, benefits from proximity, but step toward the bedroom and the temperature drops noticeably. The bed sits against an exterior wall. The window beside it radiates cold. The door between spaces blocks airflow. What begins as a unified heating effort becomes fractured by interior architecture. Winter RV travelers develop systems to manage this distribution problem. Small battery-powered fans appear on counters and shelves angled to push warm air toward sleeping areas. These fans run continuously through the evening and night, creating artificial circulation that the RV's layout prevents naturally. They make a low hum, barely audible over the furnace, and they consume minimal power while solving a fundamental comfort problem. Some travelers open cabinet doors before bed, particularly those beneath sinks where water lines run. This practice prevents pipe freezing, but it also creates pathways for warm air to move through the interior structure of the RV. Heat that would otherwise remain trapped in the living area finds routes through open cabinets, along floors toward spaces that need it. The doors stay open all night, creating an appearance of disarray that serves a practical purpose. Others position themselves strategically. If the bedroom remains stubbornly cold despite efforts, they sleep on the convertible dinette or couch in the main living area, closer to the heat source. The bed becomes storage space for the night. Comfort relocates to where warmth actually exists rather than where design suggests it should be. The distribution problem intensifies with larger RVs. A 20-foot travel trailer might maintain reasonable temperature consistency. A 40-foot fifth wheel with slide-outs and multiple rooms presents genuine challenges. The furnace works harder. The ducts grow longer. The heat dissipates over greater distance and through more walls. Travelers in these larger units sometimes run 2 heating systems simultaneously, or they close off sections of the RV entirely, consolidating living and sleeping into a smaller, more manageable thermal zone. Temperature differences become tactile as evening progresses. Walking from the warm living area to the bedroom means passing through a gradient that can span 15 degrees. The body registers this transition. Some travelers wear layers indoors specifically to manage movement between zones. A sweatshirt stays on until the moment of climbing into bed, then comes off beneath blankets where body heat and bedding create localized warmth independent of room temperature. The fan becomes a companion to sleep. Its steady operation provides white noise that masks other sounds. Wind against the RV's exterior, branches moving, distant highway traffic. But more importantly, it represents ongoing management of the cold. As long as the fan runs, warm air continues moving toward the bedroom. The sound confirms that the system functions, that attention has been paid, that comfort has been engineered rather than hoped for. Cabinet doors left open create small visual reminders of the cold outside and the warmth being protected. A glance toward the kitchen shows doors ajar, an unusual sight that signals winter mode, a household adjusted for survival rather than aesthetics. Everything visible serves a purpose related to temperature management. Heat distribution becomes a nightly ritual rather than a problem solved once. Each evening requires the same adjustments: fans positioned, doors opened, thermostat set. The routine takes on meditative quality. These small actions mark the transition from day to night, from activity to rest, from managing the world outside to creating refuge inside. The repetition builds confidence, the ritual confirms preparation. Some travelers develop elaborate personal systems involving multiple fans at different heights, strategic door positioning that creates airflow without drafts, and careful thermostat timing that maximizes heat delivery during the coldest pre-dawn hours. These systems evolved through trial and error, through nights that were too cold and adjustments made in response. Eventually, the system stabilizes. The ritual becomes efficient. The bedroom reaches acceptable temperature. sleep becomes possible. The furnace cycles on and off throughout the night, but the fans run continuously, steadily pushing whatever warmth exists toward wherever it's needed. This quiet mechanical persistence enables rest. The heat doesn't arrive naturally. It must be managed, directed, distributed through conscious effort. But once that effort becomes routine, it fades into background awareness, allowing sleep to arrive despite the cold pressing against thin walls just inches away. By mid-afternoon, experienced winter RV travelers begin their evening preparations, even if sunset remains hours away. The timing isn't arbitrary. Certain checks require daylight. Certain tasks become significantly more difficult once darkness and dropping temperatures arrive. The preparation window opens early because cold weather offers no forgiveness for procrastination. The propane check comes first. External tanks sit in compartments or mounted on the RV's tongue. The gauges, when they exist, provide rough estimates rather than precise measurements. Some travelers lift the tank slightly, feeling its weight, estimating fuel by heft developed through repeated experience. Others tap the side with a knuckle, listening for the hollow sound that indicates empty space versus the dull thud of liquid propane. The question being answered is simple, but critical. Will the fuel last through the night and into tomorrow morning? The furnace will cycle dozens of times before dawn. Each cycle consumes propane. The colder the night, the more frequently the furnace runs, the faster the tank depletes. Running out of propane at 3 in the morning when temperatures have dropped to 10 degrees transforms sleep into crisis. The calculation involves variables. How full is the tank now? How cold will tonight become? How long until morning? Is a storm arriving that might prevent refilling tomorrow? Experienced travelers build in significant margins. If there's doubt, they switch to a full backup tank now in daylight, when the connection is easy to manage. They don't wait to see if the current tank lasts. They don't gamble with overnight warmth. Weather forecasts appear on phones, providing hourly projections. Travelers check them multiple times during the afternoon, watching for changes in predicted low temperatures, wind speeds, precipitation timing. The forecast shapes decisions about where to park, whether to add extra insulation to windows, how many blankets to put on the bed. The information allows preparation rather than reaction. For those relying on battery power to run the furnace fan and lights, the afternoon includes checking battery levels and solar charge rates. Winter sun sits low and weak. Cloud cover from incoming storms reduces solar input to minimal levels. If batteries show less than optimal charge, adjustments follow. Non-essential power use gets eliminated. Backup plans emerge. Some travelers run their vehicle engine or generator briefly to boost battery charge before evening, ensuring the furnace fan will operate reliably all night. These checks create a mental inventory of systems and resources. Propane sufficient. Batteries charged, weather understood. Backup plans ready, the inventory builds confidence that allows relaxation later. Without it, evening brings nagging uncertainty that disrupts rest. The tasks themselves require only minutes, but they carry psychological weight. They represent control over an environment that could easily become uncontrollable. They transform potentially dangerous cold into a managed challenge. The afternoon preparation ritual draws a boundary between the external weather, indifferent, powerful, potentially threatening, and the internal space that will remain warm and safe through conscious effort. As the sun angles lower and shadows lengthen, the preparation takes on meditative quality. Walking around the RV, checking compartments, touching tanks, reading gauges, these actions ground travelers in the physical reality of their situation. The RV isn't a house with utility connections that never require thought. It's a self-contained system that demands attention and rewards it with reliability. Some travelers develop elaborate checklists written in notebooks or stored on phones. Others carry the routine in memory, performing the same sequence every afternoon without conscious thought. Either way, the preparation becomes a ritual, a series of small acts that mark the transition from day towards night, from movement towards stillness, from activity towards sleep. The routine includes deciding what stays outside and what comes in, Chairs and equipment that can handle snow might remain. Anything that could blow away or suffer damage gets stored. Water bottles and hoses that could freeze get brought inside or drained completely. The RV's exterior perimeter becomes secured, simplified, ready for whatever the night delivers. By the time darkness arrives, the preparation is complete. The propane will last. The systems will function. The weather is understood. What happens next, the actual cold, the storm, the long night, has been accounted for in advance. This advance accounting creates the mental space for rest. Sleep becomes possible not despite the harsh conditions outside, but because those conditions have been measured, prepared for, and integrated into a functional plan that will carry through until morning. The afternoon preparation transforms anxiety into confidence, uncertainty into readiness. The meditative quality comes from this transformation, from the knowledge that attention has been paid, that small acts of care now will enable comfort later. The ritual completes, evening can arrive, the long night can begin. As afternoon light fades and temperatures continue to drop, a specific kind of attention turns toward water. Not the snow accumulating outside, not the forecast, the water inside the RV, the lines running beneath the floor, the tanks, the pump, everything liquid that will, without intervention, become solid before morning. Most winter RVers have already winterized their plumbing systems before the season began. Pink antifreeze fills the lines where water once flowed. Tanks sit empty. The water pump is bypassed. The entire system has been put to sleep for the duration of cold weather, rendered inert but safe from the expanding force of ice that splits pipes and cracks fittings with indifferent physics. But even with winterized plumbing, water remains. Fresh water for drinking, for washing hands, for making coffee when morning comes. This water must be managed with the same attention given to propane levels and heating systems, because unlike a furnace that can be restarted, a frozen water container offers nothing until it thaws. The evening routine begins with assessment. Water bottles and jugs are brought inside from external storage. Some travelers keep a larger water container near the door, but as temperatures drop toward the threshold where liquid becomes solid, even this gets relocated, closer to the furnace, on the floor where warm air settles. Sometimes tucked into bed surrounded by blankets, kept from freezing by the same insulation that will keep a body warm. This practice seems absurd until the first morning you reach for drinking water and find it solid. Then it becomes ritual. Heated water hose systems exist for those staying at campgrounds with hookups. Electrical heating elements run the length of the hose, maintaining flow even when air temperature drops well below freezing. But these systems require constant power and careful monitoring. A tripped breaker during the night means a frozen hose by morning. Many winter travelers consider them more trouble than they're worth, preferring instead to rely on stored water brought safely inside. The fresh tank, if not winterized, gets drained before nightfall when temperatures will reach the danger zone. The gray tank, holding sink and shower water, receives the same attention. Black tanks are kept as empty as practical. Water sitting in tanks beneath an RV floor loses heat rapidly to frozen ground. And even in four-season rigs with heated underbellies, the protection has limits. This creates a particular form of self-sufficiency. By evening, the RV becomes an island independent of external water sources. Everything needed for the night sits within reach inside the living space. Water for drinking. Water for washing if desired. Water that tomorrow morning will still be water, not ice requiring thaw time before coffee can be made. Some travelers keep a kettle of water on the stove, residual heat from dinner keeping it liquid through early evening. Others use large thermoses filled with hot water before bed, providing both drinking water and a heat source that radiates warmth for hours. The multi-purpose approach, every item serving multiple functions, becomes natural in the compact, problem-solving environment of winter RV life. Morning needs are considered in the evening. A bottle of water placed beside the bed for nighttime thirst. Hand-washing water near the sink. Enough for coffee, without having to venture outside or thaw containers. This forward planning, this thinking in sequences across the darkness to come, shapes the pre-sleep routine as much as setting the thermostat or checking propane. The discipline seems excessive to those who have never experienced the alternative, but those who have reached for frozen water on a cold morning, who have waited for ice to melt before basic needs could be met, develop quick respect for the evening rituals. Better to spend 5 minutes managing water before sleep than to face the slow frustration of dealing with frozen systems after waking. For those using minimal winterization strategies, keeping some systems active with heat tape or tank heaters, the evening check involves testing these systems, confirming power flow, checking that warming elements are functioning. A small LED indicator light on a tank heater becomes as important as any other system status light, worthy of verification before settling in for the night. The water brought inside becomes part of the sleeping environment. Bottles lined up on the floor, jugs near the dinette, a kettle on the stove. These ordinary objects take on heightened significance, representing preparation and foresight, the difference between morning comfort and morning difficulty. Children growing up in winter RVS learn this routine young. The evening water protocol becomes as natural as brushing teeth. Nothing stays outside that can freeze. Everything needed comes in before dark. The lesson in consequences is immediate and clear. This attention to water creates a different relationship with it. Not the unconscious abundance of turning a tap and receiving endless flow, but measured awareness of what's available, what's needed, what must be protected. Enough for the night, enough for morning. No more than necessary, because everything brought inside must be stored somewhere in limited space. By the time darkness fully settles and sleeping preparations begin in earnest, the water question is resolved. Everything vulnerable has been brought into the protected envelope of heated space. Morning will bring its own tasks, but frozen water won't be among them. This small victory, repeated night after night, becomes part of the reliable rhythm that makes winter RV sleep possible. The instinct, when snow falls and wind presses against thin walls and temperatures drop toward numbers rarely seen on indoor thermometers, is to seal everything. Close the vents, shut the windows, create an impermeable barrier between inside warmth and outside cold. Hold on to every degree of heat the furnace produces. This instinct is wrong. Winter RV travelers crack windows during snowstorms. They leave roof vents open. They allow cold air to enter the warm space they've worked to create. This seems counterintuitive to the point of absurdity. It is also necessary. Propane furnaces, the primary heating source in most RVs, consume oxygen during combustion. The flame that creates warmth requires air. In a sealed space, that air comes from inside the living area. As the furnace runs through the night, cycling repeatedly to maintain temperature, it gradually depletes the oxygen available for breathing. The process is slow. The danger is real. Carbon monoxide detectors sit mounted on RV walls for this reason. They monitor for incomplete combustion, for the deadly gas that has no smell, no color, no warning properties except the detector's alarm. These devices are required. They are not redundant caution. They save lives in the small sealed environments where propane heat runs for hours. But beyond the question of air quality and combustion safety lies the issue of moisture. Propane combustion produces water vapor. A gallon of propane burned creates more than a gallon of water released as humidity into the air. Human breathing adds more. Cooking adds more. In a typical home, this moisture disperses through leaky construction, through the natural air exchange that occurs in structures never truly sealed. In an RV, especially one where owners have carefully added insulation and weather stripping to combat cold, moisture has nowhere to go. Without ventilation, this moisture condenses on every cold surface. Windows stream with water. Walls grow damp. Ceiling fabric sags with accumulated moisture. The dampness makes cold feel colder. It creates conditions for mold. It soaks bedding. It transforms the interior from dry refuge to clammy enclosure, where breath becomes visible and everything feels vaguely wet despite the heat. The solution contradicts comfort, but enables it. A roof vent, cracked open 2 inches. A window on the lee side, away from direct wind, opened slightly, just enough to allow air exchange without creating a gale through the living space. Cold air enters, warm, moist air escapes. The furnace runs slightly more often to compensate. The trade-off is worthwhile. Experienced winter RVers identify the minimum ventilation necessary for their specific rig and conditions. Too little, and moisture builds. Too much, and the furnace cannot keep pace with heat loss. The balance point differs for each RV, each weather condition, each heating system capacity. Finding it requires experimentation and attention. Some RVs have powered vent fans in the ceiling. These can be set to run continuously on low speed, creating steady but minimal air exchange. They draw in cold, fresh air through lower vents or cracked windows and exhaust warm, moist air through the roof. The fans use modest electricity, acceptable even when running on battery power overnight. The constant, gentle circulation prevents stratification, where hot air accumulates at the ceiling while floor-level occupants shiver. The position of ventilation matters. Opening a window on the windward side during a storm brings in snow and creates drafts that overwhelm the heating system. Opening one on the sheltered side allows air exchange while minimizing both problems. Roof vents function well in most conditions, though heavy snow can partially block them, requiring occasional clearing. The cold draft from ventilation is managed through positioning. Beds are not placed directly under roof vents, if avoidable. Sleep happens away from cracked windows. The cold air entering the space is given opportunity to mix and warm before reaching sleeping bodies. Curtains and partitions can direct airflow, protecting the sleeping area while allowing necessary exchange in the rest of the RV. This practice runs counter to every message cold weather survival typically teaches. Conserve heat, prevent drafts, seal the shelter. But those principles apply to temporary survival situations, not to living spaces heated by combustion where people spend 8 hours sleeping. The requirements differ. The wisdom adapted from other contexts can be dangerous when applied without modification. New winter RVers often resist ventilation. It seems wasteful. It feels uncomfortable. They seal everything tight, congratulating themselves on preparation, and wake to streaming windows, damp bedding, stale air, and sometimes the screech of a carbon monoxide detector. The lesson is learned quickly. Longtime winter travelers develop automatic routines. Before bed, the roof vent gets opened its standard amount. A specific window gets cracked its usual width. These measurements are not recorded in notebooks but remembered in muscle memory, repeated without conscious thought, as fundamental as locking the door. The morning confirmation comes from dry windows and fresh air rather than condensation and stuffiness. The paradox resolves when reframed. The goal is not maximum heat retention, but sustainable comfort. Not the highest possible temperature, but the right conditions for sleep. Not sealing out the cold entirely, but managing its intrusion to levels that systems and bedding can address while maintaining healthy air. On the coldest nights, when storms are strongest and the temptation to seal everything is greatest, ventilation becomes most critical. These are the nights when furnaces run longest, consume most oxygen, produce most moisture. These are the nights when proper air exchange makes the difference between waking refreshed and waking to condensation dripping from ceiling fabric onto faces. The discipline required is small. Leave the vent open. Keep the window cracked. Resist the urge to close off every gap. Accept the slight temperature reduction as the price for breathable air and dry surfaces. In exchange, sleep comes in an environment that supports it, rather than one that seems warm but gradually degrades into dampness and stagnation. By the time travelers have wintered successfully in an RV for a full season, this practice needs no justification. The windows stay cracked, the vents remain open. The cold air enters by design, and sleep happens in warmth built on proper foundation rather than sealed into slow deterioration. The question of heat during sleep divides winter RV travelers into distinct camps. Some set their thermostats to maintain a steady temperature through the night. Others lower the setting before bed, allowing the interior to cool while relying on layered bedding to maintain personal warmth. Neither approach is wrong. Each creates a different experience of the night. Those who maintain constant warmth cite uninterrupted sleep. The furnace cycles less frequently when holding a moderate temperature than when recovering from a significant drop. The air remains consistently comfortable. There is no shock of cold when emerging from blankets in the middle of the night. The space feels stable, secure. But this approach consumes more propane. A furnace maintaining 68 degrees through a storm uses significantly more fuel than one set to 55. For travelers far from refill stations, this matters. Tank levels must be monitored more carefully. The margin for error narrows. Those who lower nighttime temperatures make a different calculation. They accept a cooler interior in exchange for fuel conservation and quieter nights. A furnace set to 55 degrees cycles less often. The periods of mechanical silence lengthen. For light sleepers, this matters more than ambient temperature. The furnace itself becomes part of the decision. When a thermostat calls for heat, the ignition sequence begins with a distinct sound. The igniter clicks. The flame whooshes to life. The blower motor spins up. For some, these sounds barely register. They sleep through cycles without awareness. For others, each ignition sequence fragments sleep. The sound becomes an unwelcome companion to the night. This creates a paradox. The system meant to provide comfort can undermine rest through its operation. The solution for noise-sensitive sleepers is reducing furnace activity by lowering the thermostat and increasing bedding insulation. The body stays warm, the space stays quieter. Some use programmable thermostats to split the difference. They maintain comfortable warmth during evening hours while reading or settling in. Then the temperature drops automatically after midnight, during deepest sleep when the body notices less. It rises again before dawn, warming the space for morning emergence. This approach balances comfort, fuel efficiency, and noise reduction. The strategy also depends on bed location within the RV. Those sleeping near the furnace maintain warmth more easily with lower thermostat settings. Heat radiates from the unit itself even between cycles. Those in separate bedrooms at the far end of the rig feel temperature drops more acutely. They may need higher settings or supplemental heat sources. Outside temperature influences the equation. During moderate cold, lowering the thermostat works well. During severe storms with temperatures far below freezing, maintaining steady heat becomes more important. The RV shell loses heat faster. Temperature swings grow more pronounced. Recovery takes longer. The furnace works harder regardless of setting. Moisture control enters the consideration too. Warmer interior temperatures during breathing hours create more condensation. Cooler settings reduce the temperature differential between inside and outside, limiting moisture formation on cold surfaces. For some travelers, this factor outweighs comfort. Preferences, personal cold tolerance varies widely. What feels comfortably cool to one person feels uncomfortably cold to another. Partners sharing small sleeping spaces negotiate these differences. Compromise emerges, or one person adapts. The space is too small for separate temperature zones. Experience teaches individual preference. First-time winter RVers often start with higher thermostat settings, prioritizing warmth above all. Seasoned travelers develop more nuanced approaches. They learn their own sleep patterns. They understand their furnace's behavior. They calculate fuel consumption against comfort needs. The thermostat setting also affects morning routine. Waking in a warm RV means dressing and starting the day happens easily. Waking in a deliberately cooled space requires gathering warm clothes before leaving the bed cocoon, then waiting for the furnace to recover room temperature. Some find this ritualistic beginning satisfying. Others find it unnecessarily difficult. The setting becomes habit. The number on the thermostat dial becomes associated with successful sleep. Travelers develop loyalty to their chosen approach. They advocate for their method while acknowledging others sleep differently. There is no universal answer. The right setting depends on the RV's insulation quality, the furnace's efficiency, and noise signature, the sleeper's temperature preference and noise sensitivity, the severity of outside conditions, and the available propane supply. These variables shift constantly. What matters is that the choice is deliberate. understanding the trade-offs, making decisions based on actual experience rather than assumption, adjusting when previous nights proved uncomfortable or when fuel consumption exceeded expectations. The thermostat dial measures more than temperature. It measures the balance between systems and comfort, between resource conservation and immediate warmth, between mechanical intrusion and atmospheric control. Each traveler finds their number, the temperature that allows sleep despite the storm outside. The bed in a winter RV is not simply where you sleep. It becomes an engineered refuge, a layered system designed to counter cold rising from below, cold pressing through walls, and cold seeping through thin windows nearby. Construction begins long before sleep. The foundation presents the first challenge. RV mattresses are typically thin, often 4 to 6 inches, compared to residential mattresses of 10 to 12. Below them, minimal insulation separates the sleeping surface from the undercarriage, where frozen ground radiates cold upward through metal framing and thin flooring. The mattress alone cannot prevent this cold transfer. Memory foam toppers address the thickness and insulation problem simultaneously. 2 to 3 inches of foam add both comfort and thermal barrier. The foam's density traps air, creating resistance to heat loss. It also cushions pressure points that become more noticeable when lying still for hours in cold conditions. The body relaxes more completely. Some travelers place reflective insulation barriers beneath their mattresses. These thin panels, originally designed for camping, reflect body heat downward back upward, rather than letting it escape into the bed platform. They crinkle slightly when weight shifts, but the sound becomes negligible. The thermal benefit justifies the minor acoustic intrusion. Mattress heating pads transform the base layer from merely adequate to actively comforting. These flat electric pads slip beneath the fitted sheet, drawing power from shore connection or inverter. They provide gentle, consistent warmth that rises through the mattress rather than relying solely on body heat trapped by layers above. On severe cold nights, they eliminate the initial shock of sliding between cold sheets. But heating pads demand power. Those running on 120-volt shore power use minimal electricity. Those running on 12-volt systems draw from batteries that may already support lights, water pump, and furnace fan. The calculation matters. Some reserve heating pads only for the coldest nights when batteries can handle the load. The next layer is the fitted sheet. Flannel outperforms cotton decisively in winter. The brushed surface feels immediately warm against skin rather than cool to the touch. It breathes adequately despite its warmth. Flannel sheets in winter RVs are nearly universal among experienced cold weather travelers. Above the bottom sheet, the layering strategy becomes personal. Some start with a flat flannel sheet. Others begin immediately with blankets. The principle remains consistent. Multiple adjustable layers outperform single, heavy coverings. A fleece blanket often forms the first layer, lightweight, warm, and easy to push aside if too much heat accumulates. Fleece breathes better than synthetic fills while providing substantial insulation. It compresses into small storage space during daytime, important when living areas must serve multiple functions. Next comes a down comforter or synthetic equivalent. Down provides exceptional warmth-to-weight ratio, crucial in small spaces where heavy bedding feels oppressive. It traps air effectively. It adjusts around the body, eliminating gaps where warmth escapes. Quality matters. Higher fill power means more insulation from less weight, but down has limitations. If moisture reaches it, insulation capacity drops dramatically. In RVs where condensation management is constant work, some travelers choose synthetic fill. Slightly heavier, slightly bulkier, but it maintains insulation even when damp. A final top layer adds adjustability. Another blanket, often wool or fleece, that can be pulled up for extra warmth or pushed down when furnace cycles create temporary temperature spikes. This layer also protects the comforter beneath from oils and moisture over time, reducing the cleaning frequency needed for bulkier items difficult to wash in RV facilities. Pillows receive attention too. Cold air near windows often affects head height. Some travelers use extra pillows to create insulating mass around their heads. Others wear knit hats to bed. keeping heat from escaping through the scalp while leaving the face exposed to cooler air that aids breathing comfort. The edges and tucking matter. Gaps where blankets don't quite reach the mattress edge become cold, air infiltration points. Tucking layers tightly around the body creates a sealed system. Some tuck all layers, others leave top layers loose for easier adjustment during the night. The bed becomes a nest in the truest sense. Not flat and smooth, but built up, textured with folds and layers, each with a purpose. Climbing into this construction feels different than slipping into simple sheets. It requires minor effort. Arranging layers. Settling into the cocoon that has been prepared. The thickness of bedding transforms the sleeping experience. Weight presses down reassuringly. The body sinks slightly into multiple soft surfaces. Movement becomes deliberate rather than casual, like being held gently in place. During the day, this nest must be managed. Some travelers leave beds made with all layers in place. Others strip down to basic sheets and remake the nest each evening, folding comforters into storage during waking hours to reclaim space. Building the nest is ritual. Laying each layer, smoothing surfaces, arranging edges. The process signals transition from activity to rest, from exposure to protection, from the larger space of the RV to the smaller space of sleep. The nest works because it is built deliberately, each layer chosen for specific purpose, each addition justified by experience from previous cold nights. Not haphazard piling of blankets, but engineered comfort. When the nest is complete and the body settles into its warmth, the cold outside becomes distant, not gone, not forgotten, but held away by layers of material and trapped air and deliberate preparation. The nest makes sleep possible, not just tolerable, but genuinely comfortable. Proof that warmth can be created through accumulation, through layering, through building refuge one piece at a time. Not all comfort comes from ambient warmth. Some winter RV travelers build their sleeping systems around independence, from heat sources entirely, carrying their warmth with them, rather than waiting for it to arrive from vents and ducts. The sleeping bag becomes insurance. It sits on the bed already made with sheets and blankets, a visible reminder that comfort doesn't require the furnace to keep running. A cold weather rated bag, tested to 0 degrees or below, transforms the sleeping space from a room that must stay warm into a cocoon that remains warm regardless of what happens around it. This approach changes the relationship with heating systems. The furnace becomes a luxury rather than a necessity. If it cycles off for hours, if propane runs lower than expected, if electrical systems fail in ways that silence fans and igniters, the sleeping bag remains. It requires nothing. It promises warmth generated and retained by the body itself. Some travelers use military sleep systems designed for extreme conditions. These layer multiple bags together, a lightweight liner and intermediate bag, and a heavy outer shell rated for severe cold. The system allows adjustment. On milder nights, the outer shell stays unzipped or removed entirely. As temperatures drop, layers add back until the full system wraps the sleeper in protection that would function in conditions far harsher than any RV interior. The practice creates a particular sleeping posture. Bags don't drape like blankets. They surround. Many travelers sleep partially zipped, the bag pulled to chest or shoulders while the top remains open, allowing temperature regulation through the night. Too warm and the bag opens further. A cold draft through a window and hands pull the zipper higher without fully waking. This half-in approach maintains options. The bag stays in place, ready for deeper cold, but doesn't seal the sleeper away from ambient air entirely. Breath escapes, heat vents. The space inside the bag refreshes rather than growing stale and humid. Some position the sleeping bag inside their layered bedding system, sheets beneath for comfort against skin. The bag as the primary insulation layer. Blankets over the top for weight and additional warmth. This creates redundancy, multiple barriers between body and cold, each serving a different function. Others keep the bag unzipped entirely, using it as a top layer rather than an enclosure. The fill provides insulation similar to a thick-down comforter, but the bag's design, shaped to minimize air gaps, fitted with a draft collar and hood, makes it more thermally efficient than blankets of similar weight. The zipper itself becomes a tool for night adjustment. Half-asleep hands find it instinctively, opening or closing by increments, managing warmth without conscious thought. This differs from blankets, which must be pulled, arranged, layered, or kicked off entirely. The zipper provides granular control. Morning brings its own benefit. Rather than leaving the warmth of bed to dress in cold air, clothing goes into the sleeping bag. A shirt warmed against the body for minutes before putting it on. Socks heated in the bag's footbox before sliding onto cold feet. This small preparation makes the transition from sleep to waking less jarring. The sleeping bag also addresses a specific fear that lives quietly in winter RV travel: the possibility of heating failure during the deepest hours of the night. Propane running out, igniters failing, thermostats malfunctioning. Electrical problems silencing fans. These failures happen rarely, but they happen. Without a sleeping bag, such failure means waking to dropping temperatures, scrambling to solve problems in the dark, or abandoning sleep to monitor cold and wait for morning. With a bag rated for the outside temperature or below, failure becomes inconvenience rather than emergency. The night continues. Sleep resumes. Problems wait for daylight. This creates a particular kind of rest, not just physical warmth, but mental security. The bag represents preparation for the worst while hoping for comfort. It allows reliance on heating systems without total dependence. It makes winter RV sleep something chosen with confidence rather than attempted with anxiety. The bag itself occupies little space when not in use. Compressed into a stuff sack, it stores under beds or in overhead compartments, but its presence, even unseen, changes the calculation of risk. It extends the range of conditions in which sleep remains comfortable. It turns a marginally heated RV into a sufficiently warm sleeping space. Some travelers never use the bag's full capability. They sleep in warm RVs with furnaces running steadily, the bag unzipped or used as simple bedding. But they know it's there. They've tested it on colder nights. They understand what it can do. That knowledge matters. It separates tentative cold weather travel from committed winter living. It's the difference between hoping the heat holds and knowing you'll stay warm either way. The sleeping bag doesn't replace heating systems. It supplements them. It provides the final layer of security that allows travelers to settle into sleep without monitoring, without worry, without the low-grade vigilance that prevents deep rest. Outside, snow accumulates, temperatures fall. Wind tests seals and insulation. Inside, wrapped in fill and fabric designed for conditions harsher than these, the traveler sleeps. Not because the RV stays perfectly warm, but because the warmth travels with them, immediate and reliable, requiring nothing more than what they already carry. In the compact geometry of RV sleeping spaces, small additions create outsized effects. A heated blanket becomes a luxury that would barely register in a large bedroom. A hot water bottle transforms into a cornerstone of nighttime comfort. Scale changes value. Heated blankets arrive in two varieties, each serving different situations. Those running on shore power draw from campground electrical hookups, providing steady, consistent warmth without depleting the RV's own systems. 12-volt versions run directly from the house battery, making heat portable to locations without external power, though they demand careful attention to battery capacity. The shore power blanket operates without compromise. Set to a chosen temperature, it maintains that warmth through the night, drawing electricity that costs pennies and requires no monitoring. Placed over regular bedding or under a comforter, it creates a warm layer that compensates for inadequate furnace heat or provides comfort at lower thermostat settings that conserve propane. The 12-volt blanket involves calculation. Battery capacity matters. A blanket drawing 4 or 5 amps over 8 hours consumes 40 amp hours from a battery bank that might total only 200 when full. This works for occasional use or when solar panels replenish charge during long winter days, but it can't run indefinitely without depleting the power that runs lights, water pumps, and furnace fans. Some travelers use 12-volt blankets strategically, running them for the first hour after getting into bed, warming the sleeping space and body, then switching them off once comfort is established. The warmth lingers. Layered bedding traps it. Sleep arrives in heat that cost battery capacity but didn't require burning propane or running the furnace at higher settings. Controls matter in small spaces. A blanket with multiple heat settings allows fine adjustment. High heat to warm a cold bed quickly. Medium to maintain comfort. Low to provide just enough warmth to make thin RV mattresses and cold floors less noticeable. Auto shutoff features prevent a forgotten blanket from running all night when it was meant to warm the bed briefly before sleep. Then there are hot water bottles. Technology from another century, requiring no electricity, no battery power, no propane. Just water heated on a stove or in an electric kettle, poured into a rubber or plastic container, and placed where warmth is needed most. The process becomes a pre-sleep ritual. Water heating in a kettle while other preparations proceed. The gurgle and click of water reaching temperature. The careful pour into the bottle, leaving space for expansion. Testing the temperature against skin before committing to contact. Wrapping the bottle in a towel or sleeve if the heat is too direct. Most travelers place bottles at the foot of the bed. Feet cool first in inadequately heated spaces. Cold feet disrupt sleep more than cold air against the face or uncovered arms. A hot water bottle creates a pocket of warmth exactly where it's needed, radiating heat upward through blankets, keeping the lower body comfortable for hours. The heat doesn't last all night. Water cools. After 3 or 4 hours, the bottle becomes neutral, then eventually cool itself. But those first hours matter most. The transition into sleep, the deepest rest cycles, the time before the body fully settles into its own heat generation under layered blankets. Some use 2 bottles, one at the feet, one placed against the core. This provides warmth at both the body's coldest extremity and its heat-generating center, creating comfort zones that spread outward. Partners sometimes share bottles, trading them mid-night or positioning them in the gap between bodies where cold air otherwise settles. The bottles require nothing ongoing, no electricity draw, no propane consumption, no battery depletion. They're filled, placed, and forgotten until morning. In their simplicity lies their reliability. They can't fail. They won't drain resources. They ask only for hot water, which every RV can provide. Some travelers extend the concept, warming other items for nighttime use. A fleece jacket heated near the furnace vent, then brought to bed. Socks warmed in a sleeping bag before putting them on. Tomorrow's clothes placed under blankets overnight, so morning dressing doesn't mean pulling on fabric chilled to air temperature. These practices seem small. In a house with central heating and insulated walls, they would be unnecessary complications. But in an RV, where every degree of warmth requires fuel or power, where cold penetrates through thin walls and poorly insulated floors, where sleeping spaces measure 8 feet by 4, these minor interventions accumulate into substantial comfort. A heated blanket eliminates the need to run the furnace at 70 degrees, allowing it to idle at 60 while the bed itself maintains warmth. That saves propane. A hot water bottle creates localized heat exactly where it's needed instead of warming the entire RV interior. That saves fuel and maintains better air quality by reducing how much combustion heat cycles through the night. The compactness of RV sleeping spaces makes these solutions more effective than they would be elsewhere. Heat doesn't dissipate across large rooms. A hot water bottle in a full-sized bedroom barely affects the space. The same bottle in an RV sleeping area, confined, insulated by pulled curtains or closed doors, creates a noticeably warmer microclimate. The ritual of preparation adds value beyond the warmth itself. Filling a hot water bottle becomes a signal that the day is ending. Plugging in a heated blanket marks the transition toward sleep. These small acts create structure, routine, predictability in environments where so much depends on variables like weather and fuel supply. They also represent control. The furnace runs on a thermostat's judgment. The weather does what it will. But a hot water bottle provides warmth because the traveler decided to create it. A heated blanket delivers comfort because someone plugged it in and set the temperature. In the uncertainty of winter travel, these minor acts of agency matter. Outside, temperatures may drop below zero. Snow may accumulate in feet rather than inches. Wind may test every seal and seam. But inside, in spaces measured in square feet rather than square yards, warmth exists in layers. Blankets and bottles, electricity and water, forethought and simple technology working together to turn small spaces into sufficient shelter for the night ahead. RV beds are not chosen. They are assigned by design. Unlike a traditional bedroom where a bed can be positioned away from drafty windows or angled for comfort, an RV offers no such flexibility. The bed is built in. It sits where the manufacturer decided it should sit. Some beds run along exterior walls separated from freezing air by inches of fiberglass and foam. Some tuck into slide-outs that extend beyond the main insulated envelope. Others occupy rear corners where two cold walls meet. A few rest more centrally, buffered by surrounding space. But these are the exception. Winter travelers inherit these positions. They do not negotiate with them. The problem reveals itself at night. A bed against an exterior wall becomes a bed against cold. The wall radiates chill inward. Even with a furnace running, the surface stays cool to the touch. Pillows rest against it. Shoulders brush it. In the deep hours, when outside temperatures drop further and furnace cycles lengthen, the cold becomes a presence, not painful, but persistent. Some respond by rotating. They sleep with heads toward the center of the RV, feet toward the cold wall. This works until feet get cold. Others try the opposite. Neither solution is perfect. Both require adjustment. The more common answer is separation. A blanket hung between the bed and the wall creates dead air space. It need not be thick. A wool blanket works. A sleeping bag open flat works. Even a sheet provides some barrier. The goal is not insulation in the strict sense, but distance. The blanket absorbs the wall's cold before it reaches the sleeper. It becomes the cold surface instead. Some travelers use reflective emergency blankets, the kind designed for survival kits. These hang silverside toward the wall, reflecting radiant heat back toward the bed. They crinkle when touched. They look temporary even when they have been in place for months, but they function. Heat that would otherwise transfer to cold fiberglass stays in the sleeping space. Others build more permanent solutions, foam board cut to fit the wall space, fabric-covered rigid insulation panels, quilted barriers sewn to specific dimensions. These transformations happen gradually over multiple winters, as travelers learn exactly where cold intrudes and how much buffer is needed. In smaller RVs, beds often convert from dining areas. Cushions rearrange, tables drop, the configuration changes each evening and reverses each morning. These beds sit near windows on multiple sides. Cold surrounds them. The solution here is not barriers, but layering beneath. Extra padding between body and the vinyl cushions that grow cold from below. Sleeping bags placed directly on the surface, then the sleeper inside, creating separation from the cold base. Partners sleep closer in winter RVs than they might elsewhere. This is partly intentional. Shared warmth is real warmth, but partly unavoidable. The beds are small. A queen mattress in an RV measures the same as a residential queen, but the space around it does not exist. There is no room to spread out, no rolling to a far cool corner. Bodies occupy the same compressed area night after night. Some couples appreciate this. The proximity becomes part of the experience, a physical closeness that matches the broader intimacy of confined living. Others find it challenging, a lack of personal space during sleep. Most adapt. They develop unspoken arrangements about positioning, about who sleeps against the cold wall, about how blankets get distributed when one person runs warm and the other cold. Pets complicate and improve the arrangement. Dogs that might sleep in separate beds at home climb into RV beds without invitation. Cats that prefer distance seek out the warmth of human bodies. This is mutual aid, not affection. The animal provides warmth. The human provides warmth. Both benefit. A medium-sized dog against the back or legs raises the effective temperature of the sleeping zone. A cat curled near the core does the same. Travelers stop resisting this. A dog that takes up a third of a small bed is also a dog generating heat through the night. The trade is fair. The beds themselves do not move, but everything else adjusts around them. Blankets shift, bodies reposition. Barriers go up between flesh and cold surfaces. What cannot be changed is worked around, and over time, the fixed space starts to feel less like a constraint and more like a known quantity. The bed is there. The cold wall is there. The solutions are there. Sleep happens in the space between. Condensation begins before sleep and continues through the night. The physics are simple. Warm air holds moisture. Cold surfaces do not. When the two meet, water appears. In a winter RV, they meet constantly. Breathing adds moisture to the air. A person at rest exhales roughly a liter of water vapor over 8 hours. Two people exhale 2 liters. This moisture enters a small enclosed space, perhaps 200 cubic feet of air in the sleeping area of a compact RV. The air warms from body heat and furnace heat. It absorbs the moisture, then it contacts the windows. RV windows are single pane. Some have thin double pane assemblies, but even these conduct cold aggressively compared to residential windows. The glass temperature matches the outside air more than the inside air. When warm, moist air touches that cold surface, it cools instantly. The moisture it carried condenses. Water beads form. They grow. They run down the glass in thin streams. This happens on every window. It happens on skylights. It happens on the entry door window, on the back window over the bed, on the small side windows that provide cross-ventilation in warmer months. By mid-evening, the glass is wet. By midnight, if temperatures drop low enough, the water freezes. Ice builds in delicate patterns at first, then in thicker, opaque layers. The problem compounds. Propane furnaces add moisture as they burn. For every pound of propane consumed, roughly a pound of water vapor is released into the air. This is a byproduct of combustion. The furnace vents its exhaust outside, but some moisture escapes into the living space through the combustion air intake, through brief backdrafts when the system cycles, through the general leakiness of RV construction. A furnace running intermittently through a cold night adds measurable humidity. Cooking adds more. Dinner. Preparations, boiling water, simmering soup release steam. Even a kettle for tea contributes. In a large house, this moisture disperses into many rooms and eventually escapes through natural air exchange. In an RV, it concentrates. It has fewer places to go. The air grows heavier with it. The windows cannot absorb this moisture. They can only collect it. Water runs down the glass and pools on the window frames. Aluminum frames channel it toward corners. Plastic frames let it sit. Either way, it accumulates. Some drips onto countertops. Some runs down walls. In extreme cases, very cold nights, heavy breathing, long furnace operation, water drips from the ceiling where warm air has condensed on cold roof panels. The dampness changes the feel of cold. Dry cold is tolerable. The body adjusts. Damp cold penetrates. It makes 50 degrees feel like 40. It makes blankets feel less effective. It clings to fabric, to upholstery, to the bedding itself if moisture levels rise high enough. Ice on the windows looks beautiful in morning light. Frost patterns spread in feathered crystals. But the ice is frozen moisture that belonged in the air, now locked to the glass. Scraping it away releases it back into the space as the RV warms. The cycle begins again. Travelers who ignore condensation wake to wet windowsills. They find damp spots on walls. Over weeks, mold appears in corners, on fabric surfaces, in the seams of cushions. The RV smells different. It feels different. The moisture becomes a chronic presence, not a nightly inconvenience. Some of this is unavoidable. Breathing cannot stop. Heating cannot stop. Windows will always be the coldest surface, but the severity varies with choices made before sleep. Ventilation reduces it. Lowering the furnace temperature reduces it. Wiping windows dry before bed gives a clean start. Addressing it requires intention, and intention requires understanding the basic physics. Warm air from living meets cold glass from winter, and water appears at the border between them. The invisible problem makes itself visible on windows. By nightfall, condensation begins its quiet accumulation. Breath meets cold glass. Propane heat carries moisture. The small enclosed space holds what it cannot release. By morning, without intervention, windows weep. Ice forms in corners. Walls feel damp to the touch in places where insulation fails and temperature drops. Winter RV travelers learn to fight moisture they cannot see by managing what they can measure. The counterintuitive solution requires cracking a window, not wide, an inch, sometimes less, enough to allow air exchange without sacrificing hard-won warmth. The instinct rebels against this. Outside, temperatures fall below freezing. Snow accumulates. Wind finds every opening. Yet the small gap prevents greater problems than it creates. Sealed tight, the RV becomes a terrarium. Moisture from breathing, from propane combustion, from cooking, from bodies radiating heat into cold air has nowhere to go. It condenses on the coldest surfaces. It collects. It freezes. It creates dampness that makes cold feel colder, that promotes mold in hidden spaces, that turns windows into ice sheets by dawn. The vent in the ceiling cracks open 2 inches. Cold air enters, but moisture escapes. The furnace works slightly harder. Propane consumption increases marginally, but windows stay clearer. The air feels less oppressive. Sleep happens in freshness rather than staleness. Some travelers run small dehumidifiers when connected to shore power. The units hum through the night, pulling moisture from air, collecting it in reservoirs that empty each morning. They generate their own heat as a byproduct, adding to the thermal load the furnace must maintain. The trade-off balances. Drier air feels more comfortable even at slightly lower temperatures. Without electrical connection, moisture absorbers sit in strategic locations. Calcium chloride crystals in vented containers placed near windows, under beds, and cabinets where cold exterior walls create condensation zones. They pull humidity silently, requiring no power, working through chemistry instead of mechanics. The containers fill slowly with captured water over days and weeks. The pre-sleep ritual includes wiping windows dry. A microfiber cloth moves across glass, collecting the day's accumulated moisture, giving the night a fresh start. This simple act, repeated each evening, prevents buildup. It keeps condensation manageable rather than allowing it to compound. The cloth comes away damp even when windows look clear. The invisible becomes tangible. Morning reveals the night's moisture production. Windows fog first, then frost in patterns that follow temperature gradients. The coldest corners ice over. Sliding glass doors collect the most dramatic formations. Travelers who skipped evening ventilation wake to windows they cannot see through, requiring scraping from inside before assessing outside conditions. The moisture management dance becomes automatic, vent cracked. Dehumidifier running or absorbers positioned, windows wiped. These small acts, performed while the furnace hums and darkness settles, prevent the accumulated problems that degrade comfort over multiple winter nights. Some travelers keep small towels within reach of the bed, not for personal use, but for midnight window wiping if condensation builds despite precautions. The cloth stays ready, positioned on a shelf or hook. When moonlight through frosted glass dims too much, when dripping starts, a hand reaches out, wipes, returns to warmth. Sleep continues. The RV responds to human presence through condensation. Each breath adds moisture. Each hour of occupation changes the interior atmosphere. The small space amplifies effects that houses disperse through volume. 2 people sleeping in 40 square feet produce enough moisture over 8 hours to coat every cold surface if that moisture has no escape path. Understanding this transforms frustration into practice. The condensation is not a flaw in the RV or a failure of systems. It is physics. Warm, moisture-laden air meets surfaces colder than dew point. Water appears. Managing it requires working with the physics rather than against them. Heat alone cannot solve it. The moisture must leave or be captured. Otherwise, it simply moves to the next cold surface. The balance point exists between too much ventilation that wastes heat and too little that traps moisture. Each RV, each climate, each configuration of occupants requires finding that point through experimentation. Windows crack different amounts. Vents open to varying degrees. The furnace compensates. Over nights and weeks, travelers discover their particular equation. Morning condensation that refreezes when the door opens creates its own challenges. The rush of frigid outside air drops interior glass temperature instantly. Moisture that was merely condensed becomes ice in seconds. This teaches the importance of wiping before opening, of managing moisture continuously rather than addressing it only when visible. The moisture management dance never ends, but it becomes graceful. Part of the evening settling, part of the nighttime awareness, part of the morning assessment. Not a problem requiring constant attention, but a rhythm requiring consistent practice. The small acts accumulate into dry comfort. The invisible enemy, managed through visible routine, stays defeated. Snow arrives with whispers, not announcements. The first flakes make no sound at all against the RV roof. Only when accumulation begins does the acoustic signature emerge. Individual flakes become a collective presence, soft, steady, a sound felt as much as heard. The rhythm has no beat, only continuity. Not quite white noise, not quite silence, something between. A gentle static that fills the small space, muffling harder sounds from outside, creating sonic insulation that adds to physical warmth. The sound builds gradually as snowfall intensifies, providing continuous feedback about conditions outside without requiring a look through darkened windows. Light snow creates the softest presence, a whisper of contact, barely perceptible unless other sounds fade completely. The listener must stop breathing to hear it fully, holding still in darkness, attending to the faint percussion of winter, settling on thin metal and fiberglass above. Then breath resumes and the sound retreats to the edge of awareness, present but not intrusive. Heavy snow makes itself known clearly. The impacts multiply. The accumulation thickens. What was whisper becomes murmur, then steady susurration. The sound fills the sleeping space, surrounding rather than directional, coming from everywhere the roof extends overhead. It creates a cocoon of acoustic comfort that many travelers find deeply sleep-inducing. The brain recognizes safety, shelter working as intended, storm kept outside, warmth maintained within. Wind adds complexity to snow's simple song. Gentle wind moves snow in waves across the roof. The sound shifts and flows, intensifying and fading, creating variation within the pattern. Strong wind drives snow horizontally before it can settle, creating impact sounds against the RV's side walls, a different timbre than roof accumulation. The small home rocks slightly on its suspension. The structure flexes. Sounds multiply. Between gusts and the pauses wind creates, the steady snowfall reasserts itself. The contrast heightens awareness of both sounds. The buffeting wind, then the soft snow. Movement, then stillness. The cycle continues through the night, sometimes gentle, sometimes insistent, always present. The furnace punctuates the snow's continuity. Where snow provides steady background, the furnace creates rhythmic foreground. The thermostat clicks. The ignition sequence begins. Sparks snap. Gas ignites with a soft whoosh. The blower motor spins up. Warm air rushes through metal ducts, creating hollow wind-like sounds inside the walls. The heat fills the space. Temperature rises. The thermostat satisfies. The sequence reverses. Blower winds down. flame extinguishes. Silence returns until the next cycle. This mechanical rhythm becomes familiar after the first night, comforting by the second, completely integrated by the third. The sound associates with warmth, with systems functioning, with preparation validated. Rather than disturbing sleep, it marks time through the night, providing reassurance during half-waking moments that everything continues working as intended. The cycling interval reveals outside temperature. 15-minute cycles mean bitter cold, the furnace working hard to maintain set temperature. 20-minute cycles indicate more moderate conditions. 30 minutes or longer suggests mild weather or excellent insulation performing well. Experienced winter RVers unconsciously track these intervals, sleeping but aware, noting patterns that inform morning assessments. Other mechanical sounds contribute to the nighttime orchestra. The refrigerator hums, cycling its own rhythm independent of the furnace. If connected to electricity, a dehumidifier adds its steady drone. Battery chargers emit faint high-frequency sounds. Water heaters click on if set to maintain temperature. Each sound marks a system working, contributing to the overall functionality that enables comfort. The sounds winter RVers hear differ fundamentally from household nighttime acoustics. Houses filter and distance. Furnaces run in basements. Walls separate sleepers from weather by feet of insulation. The sounds that reach bedrooms are muffled, distant, abstract. RV sounds are immediate, intimate. The furnace sits beneath the bed or in an adjacent cabinet. The roof, where snow accumulates, lies inches above the sleeper's face. The walls, where wind presses, stand within arm's reach. The sounds carry more information, create more presence, demand more initial adjustment. But adaptation happens. What seemed loud on night 1 becomes normal by night 3, comforting by night 7, and by night 30 exists as the expected soundscape without which sleep feels incomplete. The sounds become home. Outside, beyond the layered sounds of snow and systems, silence deepens. Snow muffles everything it covers. Trees stop creaking. Ground sounds disappear. Wildlife moves quietly, or not at all. The world outside the RV becomes acoustically dead, making the sounds inside more prominent by contrast, more detailed, more worthy of attention. The sound of snow falling marks winter RV sleep as distinct from any other sleeping experience. It cannot be replicated in houses or hotels or summer camping. It requires the specific combination: thin roof, small space, protective warmth, storm outside. It becomes the sound of successful shelter, of comfort achieved despite conditions. The sound of winter mastered. The propane furnace does not operate in silence. Its cycle begins with a deliberate click, the thermostat calling for heat. A pause follows, then ignition. A soft whoosh as fuel meets flame inside the combustion chamber. The blower fan accelerates from stillness to full speed in seconds, a rising hum that settles into steady operation. Air begins moving through ducts, creating sound specific to each RV's layout, rushing through narrow passages, emerging from floor vents or ceiling registers with slightly different tones, depending on distance and direction. This is not one sound. It is a sequence, repeating throughout the night in intervals determined by insulation quality, outside temperature, and thermostat setting. Experienced winter RV sleepers know this sequence intimately. The click becomes associated not with disturbance, but with response, the system recognizing cold and answering it. The ignition whoosh means fuel is available, flame is present, warmth is coming. The fan acceleration signals heat beginning its journey from furnace to sleeping space. Between heating cycles, other systems contribute their own notes. The refrigerator maintains a quiet hum, running on propane or shore power depending on connection, its compressor cycling independently of the furnace. In RVs where water systems remain active rather than winterized, the water pump occasionally engages to maintain pressure, a brief mechanical pulse. These sounds layer and separate, creating a texture of operation rather than silence. The thermostat itself produces sound, a distinct click when calling for heat, sometimes a quieter click when satisfied. This tiny mechanical voice punctuates the night, announcing changes in the thermal environment, before the sleeper's body registers them. It becomes a form of communication between system and occupant, the RV reporting its own state. This is the orchestra of systems maintaining life support in a metal box surrounded by freezing air and falling snow. Each sound represents function. Each function represents the continuation of warmth, and therefore the possibility of comfortable sleep. Over time, these sounds shift from disturbance to reassurance, proof that systems are working, that preparation was adequate, that the night will pass safely. The head remains cool. This is deliberate for some, accidental for others, but nearly universal in winter RV sleep. Cold air settles near windows. Pillows rest against walls with minimal insulation. The face stays exposed to bedroom air that is always several degrees cooler than the temperature under blankets. Some travelers find this temperature gradient ideal. Cool air to breathe, warm body cocooned below. The torso and legs exist in a different thermal zone entirely. Multiple blanket layers trap body heat and furnace warmth, creating a microclimate that can become almost too warm as the night progresses. The weight of this bedding, heavier than summer sleeping requires, creates physical pressure across the body. This cocooning effect produces what many describe as deeper, more secure rest. The blankets become both insulation and gentle compression. Propane heat produces dry air. This is the nature of combustion heating. Moisture is not added, only warmth. Sleepers sometimes wake with dry mouths, dry nasal passages, the mild discomfort of air lacking the humidity that human bodies prefer. Some counter this with humidifiers when shore power allows. Others accept it as the price of staying warm, keeping water bottles within reach. Cold drafts arrive unpredictably. Wind shifts outside. A window seal allows a thin stream of frigid air to enter. The furnace shuts off between cycles, and in that pause, cold begins reasserting itself from walls and floor. These moments of chill are brief but noticeable, a reminder that warmth is maintained, not guaranteed. The body registers them even in sleep, often triggering unconscious adjustment of blanket position or body posture. The overall sensation is one of contrast, held in balance. Cool face, warm core, dry air, soft bedding. Mechanical sound, physical stillness, weight and warmth together. Many winter RV travelers report sleeping more soundly than in climate-controlled homes, where temperature remains uniform and blankets serve only symbolic purpose. The body, it seems, responds to this particular combination of cool air and warm refuge with deep, sustained rest. The mind does not shut down completely during winter nights in an RV. Sleep arrives, sometimes deeply, but a thread of awareness remains connected to the small space and the systems maintaining its warmth. This is not anxious vigilance. It is something quieter. A background monitoring that experienced winter travelers recognize as normal, even comfortable. The furnace cycles, on, then off, on again. The rhythm becomes familiar over hours and nights, predictable enough that deviation registers even during sleep. When the furnace ignites, there is the click of the thermostat, the whoosh of flame, the building hum of the blower. When it shuts off, silence returns except for wind and snow. The absence of sound can wake someone as readily as noise, eyes open in darkness, ears focus, listening, waiting for the next cycle to confirm the system still functions. It does. The click returns, flame ignites, warmth begins moving through ducts again. Sleep resumes. Temperature shifts throughout the night as the furnace maintains its target range. The sleeper adjusts without full consciousness, pulling blankets higher when the heating cycle ends and air begins cooling, loosening them when warmth builds again. These are small movements, brief surfacings toward wakefulness that rarely break sleep entirely. The body responds to cold and warmth the way it responds to any gradual change, making minor corrections that preserve comfort. Sometimes the wind increases, pressing against the RV with enough force to create movement, a gentle rocking, a vibration through the frame. This too becomes familiar rather than alarming. The RV shifts slightly on its stabilizers. Snow accumulates on the windward side. The sounds change texture as drifts build. Sleepers register these shifts, process them as expected rather than dangerous, and remain in rest. Occasionally, full waking arrives, eyes open. Awareness returns completely. The question forms, how much snow has fallen? From the bed, windows show darkness and moving white. Flakes illuminated by a porch light or the diffuse glow of snow under moonlight create a contained world of visible weather. The storm continues. Accumulation is happening, but not yet measurable from inside. Morning will reveal totals. For now, the snow falls, the furnace runs, and warmth holds. Some nights include the practical necessity of using facilities. RVs vary. Some have full bathroom steps from the bed. Others require minimal travel through cold air to a small enclosed space. The sleeper moves quickly, feet on cold floor, and returns to warmth as soon as possible. The disruption is brief. Sleep reclaims quickly. What matters is that these wakeful moments do not carry stress. The preparation was thorough. Propane was checked. Heat is functioning. Blankets are sufficient. The storm outside is expected, monitored earlier through forecasts, and manageable. Nothing requires action in darkness. Morning will bring assessment and response if needed. Tonight is for rest. This half-conscious monitoring comes from nights of experience, from learning what sounds and sensations are normal versus concerning, from building confidence through repeated successful storms. The first winter night in an RV often brings lighter sleep, more frequent checking, uncertainty about whether systems will hold through darkness. By the 10th storm, the 100th night, the monitoring becomes automatic and unworried. The sleeper knows the difference between the furnace cycling normally and struggling, between wind that rocks gently and wind that threatens, between cold that bedding handles and cold that requires adjustment. Sleep in a winter RV is not the oblivious unconsciousness of a climate-controlled bedroom insulated from weather. It maintains connection to the environment, to the thin walls and the systems working, to the storm progressing outside. But this connection becomes reassurance rather than anxiety. The sounds confirm function. The sensations confirm protection. The occasional waking moments confirm that preparation was enough, that warmth continues, that morning will arrive with the sleeper rested rather than exhausted by worry. The sleeping area of most RVs measures between 40 and 100 square feet. A bed, perhaps built into a corner or extending across the rear wall. Small cabinets above or beside it. A window, maybe a shelf. Everything else that exists in this space exists because someone placed it within arm's reach deliberately, knowing that movement is limited and every item must justify its presence. In winter, this containment intensifies. Evening activities that might happen in a living area or outside during warmer months now occur in or very near the bed. Reading happens propped against pillows with a book or tablet. Conversation between partners happens face-to-face in a space where being more than 2 feet apart is impossible. Watching something on a phone or small screen happens while already under blankets because moving to another location means leaving. Warmth. The bed becomes the primary living space once darkness falls, and outside cold makes the RV interior segregate into zones of more and less warmth. The furnace may be positioned toward the front or middle. Heat distributes, but bedrooms at the rear or over the cab cool faster between cycles. Travelers retreat to their sleeping area and stay there, bringing with them whatever the evening requires. Water bottle, phone charger, headlamp, books, snacks. This enforced proximity to a partner or travel companion creates intimacy that has no privacy buffer. There is no separate room to retreat to after a disagreement, no space to spread out and be alone. The bed is shared. The four walls are close. Every sound, every movement, every mood exists in immediate awareness of the other person. For some, this is strain. The inability to create distance when wanted. the constant awareness of another body in a small space, the negotiation over temperature preferences when one person runs hot and another cold under the same blankets. These tensions exist and matter. But many winter RV travelers report the opposite experience. The proximity feels secure rather than confining, especially as storms intensify outside. The shared warmth under blankets becomes practical cooperation. The quiet conversation in darkness before sleep becomes ritual. The knowledge that someone else is monitoring systems, listening to the same sounds, experiencing the same night creates partnership in a way that separate bedrooms in large houses sometimes prevent. Everything is within reach. A glass of water sits on the narrow shelf. A phone charges from a USB port nearby. A flashlight rests where a hand can find it instantly if needed. Books stack within arm's length. The efficiency of the design, which can feel cramped during daylight, becomes appreciated at night. Nothing requires getting up. Nothing requires leaving warmth. The small space contains everything needed for the hours until morning. Darkness in an RV often arrives more completely than in houses. No streetlights filter through curtains. No neighboring windows glow across yards. If interior lights are off and no security light burns outside, the blackness is total, except for small indicator LEDs on appliances or the faint glow of a phone screen. This darkness supports sleep in ways that suburban bedrooms often cannot match. The body responds to true dark. Sometimes a porch light remains on, illuminating falling snow outside the window. This creates a snow globe effect, the small lit sphere of visible storm against complete darkness beyond. Flakes fall through the cone of light, accumulating on the ground, on the RV roof, on tree branches nearby. Watching this from bed before sleep becomes a meditative practice, the movement hypnotic and endless. The space itself imposes simplicity. There is no room for clutter, no space for possessions beyond the essential. The sleeping area contains bed, bedding, a few personal items, and nothing more. This absence of visual complexity quiets the mind in ways that overfilled bedrooms do not. There are no piles to organize mentally, no decisions about what to do with accumulated things. The space is what it is: small, warm, sufficient. Partners sleep close not by choice but by necessity, bodies sharing warmth under layered blankets. Feet touch, a shoulder rests against another shoulder. Breath is audible in the quiet between furnace cycles. This enforced intimacy either deepens connection or reveals incompatibility quickly. There is no hiding in separate zones, no maintaining distance. Winter RV life makes partnership physical and immediate every single night. The walls are thin. This is not a secret to anyone who sleeps in an RV, but in winter, during a storm, the thinness becomes something felt rather than merely known. The aluminum skin measures perhaps 1.5 inches total. Outer metal, insulation, inner paneling, and beyond that, nothing but night and falling snow and temperatures 20 or 30 degrees below freezing. You are lying perhaps 18 inches from the outside world. The temperature differential is acute. Outside, the air hovers near 15 degrees. Inside, the furnace maintains 68. Between these two states, only the thin composite wall. Your shoulder, if it touches the wall near the bed, registers cold immediately through fabric and skin. The exterior surface of that wall, facing the storm, is collecting frost. The interior surface facing you is warm enough to touch comfortably but noticeably cooler than the air 6 inches away from it. This proximity creates a particular kind of awareness. In a house, walls are thick. Insulation fills cavities. Drywall and siding create distance. The outside feels distant, abstracted, something happening in a different realm entirely. But in an RV, the outside remains present, not intruding, but near. The storm is not somewhere beyond the building. It is immediately there, separated by a membrane rather than a barrier. The wind, when it gusts, does not whistle distantly. It presses against the wall beside the bed. The metal flexes slightly, barely perceptibly, but the pressure transmits through the structure. Not threatening, not alarming, but tangible. The vehicle shifts minutely on its suspension. Snow accumulating on the roof adds weight that can be sensed in the way. Sounds change, the way the space feels slightly more enclosed as drifts build against the lower walls. This thinness, paradoxically, intensifies appreciation for what protection exists. The cold is right there. The storm is immediate. Yet inside remains warm, dry, still. The contrast is not theoretical. It is physical, measurable, experienced simultaneously. One hand placed on the wall near the window feels cold, radiating inward. The same hand moves 6 inches toward the center of the RV, finds warm air from the furnace vent. The difference is not subtle. Many winter RV travelers describe feeling more connected to weather precisely because they are so aware of it while being protected from it. In a well-insulated house, a storm can be ignored, background information observed through distant windows. In an RV, the storm remains present throughout the night, not as danger, but as context. The sleep happens within the storm rather than apart from it. The sounds reinforce this proximity. Snow falling on the roof is not muffled by attic space and thick shingles. It taps directly on metal barely a foot above the pillow. Wind does not howl somewhere outside thick walls. It moves across thin ones, creating immediate acoustic response. The temperature of the glass in the window near the bed can be felt from inches away, radiating cold that never quite reaches the blankets but remains perceptible. This creates vulnerability and security simultaneously. The shelter is minimal. The protection is thin. The conditions are harsh and immediate. Yet the warmth holds. The systems function. The sleep continues undisturbed. The awareness of how little separates comfort from exposure does not create anxiety in most experienced winter travelers. Instead, it generates a particular satisfaction. The threshold is narrow, but it is sufficient. The margin is small, but it is real. The sleeping area in a typical RV measures perhaps 40 square feet. In that space, a bed, perhaps a small cabinet, maybe a shelf. Nothing more fits. Nothing more is needed. This enforced simplicity shapes the experience of preparing for sleep in ways that many travelers report as unexpectedly beneficial. There are no choices about which room to sleep in. The bed is where it is. There is no decision about which blanket to retrieve from a distant closet. Everything needed is within arm's reach because everything owned is within 10 feet. The evening does not involve moving through a house, gathering items, preparing spaces. The space is already prepared by virtue of having nowhere else to be. Possessions are limited not by discipline, but by physics. What does not fit does not exist. The result is a sleeping environment with almost nothing in it. No piles of unfolded laundry, no stacks of books that might be read, no exercise equipment gathering dust. No furniture that seemed like a good idea once. Just the bed, the bedding, perhaps a reading light, and whatever book or device is currently in use. This uncluttered quality affects how the mind settles toward sleep. In larger spaces, the eye can wander. Objects accumulate associations, tasks undone, projects abandoned, items requiring decisions. Even when these things are not consciously noticed, they populate the peripheral environment, creating low-level mental noise. But in an RV sleeping space, there's almost nothing to see. The walls are bare or nearly bare. Storage is hidden behind cabinet doors. The space reads as empty, simple, dedicated entirely to rest. Many travelers describe this as unexpectedly restful. The darkness, too, is more complete. Fewer windows mean fewer light sources. No glow from distant streetlights filtering through multiple rooms. The small space can be made entirely dark with simple curtains or shades. When the lights go out, the darkness is immediate and total. Sounds are similarly minimal. In a house, ambient noise travels. Refrigerators in distant kitchens, furnaces in basements, water heaters cycling in utility rooms. In an RV, the sounds present are only those of the immediate systems. The furnace when it runs. The storm outside. Nothing distant or indirect. The acoustic environment is simple. Even evening routines simplify. There is no wandering through a house, checking locks, adjusting thermostats in multiple rooms, making sure everything is off. Everything is visible from the bed. the entire living space can be assessed in a glance. The door is there. The heater controls are there. The propane indicator is there. Nothing requires getting up to check or verify. The whole environment is contained within a single field of awareness. This reduction of choices extends to activities. There is nowhere else to be in the evening, no den to sit in, no porch to step onto, no office to check. The options are stay in bed reading or preparing for sleep, or sit at the small dinette if one exists. The decision tree is extremely short. For many people accustomed to houses with many rooms and many options, this initially feels constraining, but after adjustment, many report finding it focusing rather than limiting. The mind, given fewer options, stops processing decisions. The body, in a space dedicated entirely to rest, stops negotiating between activities. The environment communicates a single message. This is where sleep happens, and nothing else needs to happen now. This is not minimalism as aesthetic choice or lifestyle philosophy. It is minimalism as unavoidable condition. But the effect on sleep quality, according to those who experience it, is often the same as intentional simplification. The constraints create focus. The simplicity removes friction. The small space becomes not a limitation of comfort, but a container for rest. Winter campgrounds gather people who have chosen the same unusual path. They park their RVs in designated spots separated by 20 or 30 feet, close enough to see but far enough to maintain privacy. Each rig is its own small world. Each follows its own evening routine, but they share the same cold air, the same falling snow, the same night. Before a storm arrives, there might be brief gatherings. Someone mentions the forecast. Another confirms propane deliveries completed. Information moves between rigs, which roads closed first last winter, how low temperatures actually dropped, whether the campground plows before dawn or after. Then, as darkness comes and snow begins, everyone returns to their own space. Doors close. Lights come on behind curtained windows. Through the evening, these lights become quiet communication. A neighbor's window glowing warm confirms their heater runs. Their systems work. They settled in successfully. Vapor rising from roof vents shows furnaces cycling. Occasionally a door opens, someone stepping out to check accumulation or retrieve firewood, then closes again. Small sounds carry in cold air. A propane tank being switched. Snow brushed from a step. A brief exchange of words, then silence returns. No one intrudes. No one needs constant contact. But awareness remains. The same storm that rocks one RV rocks all of them. The same wind that tests one set of stabilizers tests everyone's. They weather identical conditions from separate tiny homes, each solving the same problems with slightly different systems, each building their own warmth against the same cold. Morning check-ins come naturally. Someone emerges to clear snow, and others do the same. Accumulation depth gets confirmed, road conditions discussed. The shared experience of the night creates connection without requiring togetherness. They chose solitude, but not isolation. They chose independence, but within community. The transition from sleep comes gradually, not sudden, not jarring. Awareness returns in layers. First, a different quality of light. Even through closed eyelids, even through curtains, something has changed. The darkness is less dark. A brightness exists that was not there when sleep began. Snow reflects what little light exists. Moon, distant street lamps, the first suggestion of dawn, and sends it back, amplified. The world outside has turned white, and that whiteness glows. Second, muffled quiet. Sound moves differently through snow-covered space. The sharp edges are gone. Wind no longer rattles metal with the same intensity. If it snowed heavily, the RV roof carries inches of accumulation, a blanket that dampens noise from above. The acoustic signature of the world has shifted. Third, temperature awareness. Still cocooned under layers of blankets, the question forms without words. How cold is the air beyond this nest? Is the furnace still cycling? A hand emerges, tests the air near the face, withdraws. The furnace answers with its familiar ignition sequence, still working, still maintaining. Fourth, the first look. Without leaving bed, a hand reaches to pull curtain edge aside. Frost patterns cover the window, expected, normal, managed. Through a clear spot, or by wiping condensation away, the outside world appears. Snow covers everything: the ground, the picnic table, the neighboring RV. Accumulation depth becomes visible: 6 inches, 8, enough to require clearing before moving, but not enough to trap. The assessment happens from warmth, no need to rush into cold. The blankets remain pulled close while eyes gather information and mind makes plans. Where are warm clothes? Is the coffee maker within reach? Can morning routines begin from bed before facing the full reality of what the night delivered? This gradual emergence is itself a luxury. No alarm forces sudden waking. The storm has already passed or continues gently. Either way, the immediate demand is simply to acknowledge what occurred while asleep. The RV remained warm. The systems held. Another winter night successfully navigated. The transition from sleep world to snow world requires no urgency, only slow recognition. Sleep ends, not suddenly. The body wakes gradually to different light, bright white reflected through frost patterns on windows. Sound arrives muffled. Snow absorbs everything outside. Inside, the furnace cycles one more time. The air feels dry, warm still. But morning brings responsibilities before the day can properly begin. The first task happens while still wrapped in blankets. A glance toward the propane monitor mounted on the wall. The needle sits lower than yesterday evening, not critically low, but lower. A night of heating consumed fuel in measurable amounts. The furnace cycled perhaps 40 times, maybe more. Each ignition sequence pulled from the tank. Each burn period maintained the barrier between inside warmth and outside cold. The gauge tells the story of the night in declining pressure. The mental calculation begins automatically. How many days remain at this consumption rate? Whether the tank requires filling before another night passes? Where the nearest propane source sits in relation to current location? This assessment requires no alarm clock. It happens as naturally as checking the time. For those camping without electrical hookup, a second check matters equally. Battery voltage. The 12-volt system powered the furnace blower all night. Pushed heated air through ducts, operated the thermostat, ran LED lights during evening hours. The monitor shows battery state, perhaps 60% remaining. Perhaps less if the battery ages or temperature drops severely. This number determines morning options, whether enough power exists for another night without running the generator or driving to recharge, whether the solar panels will recover the deficit if sun breaks through clouds, whether adjustment becomes necessary. The experienced winter traveler reads these numbers without anxiety. They represent information, data points, facts requiring response, but not worry. Propane and batteries form the twin pillars of winter RV sleep. Monitoring them becomes second nature. Still in bed, observation continues. Ice patterns on windows show where condensation froze overnight, despite ventilation. Thicker in corners where air circulation reduced, minimal near the cracked vent where fresh air entered. The pattern reveals how well moisture management worked, whether more ventilation will be needed tonight. A hand reaches toward the window surface, touches cold glass. Frost melts slightly under warm fingertips. Later, this ice will need a dressing, but for now it waits while other assessments complete. The floor remains cold. Always the floor. Heat rises. Insulation below stays minimal in most RVs. Socks and slippers sit within reach for exactly this reason. They go on before feet touch the surface. The furnace clicks off. Reach temperature. The silence feels different from night silence. Morning silence. The thermostat gets adjusted higher. A boost of warmth before the door opens and cold rushes in. Outside requires inspection. Not yet, but soon. From the window, the visible world shows white. Accumulation on nearby trees drifts against the RV body. The entry door may need clearing before it can open fully. Steps will require shoveling. These tasks wait until warm clothes replace sleeping layers. This morning ritual validates preparation. If systems performed well, the night passed comfortably. If propane ran lower than expected, adjustment becomes tonight's priority. If batteries drain too far, the day's plan shifts to include recharging time. If ice buildup seems excessive, more ventilation enters the evening routine. Nothing about this process feels burdensome to those who choose winter RV life. The checks become meditation, a conversation with systems, confirmation that knowledge and preparation worked, or information about what needs changing. The door opens, cold air pours inward. It moves like water, fills the space near the floor first, spreads. The warmth inside meets it, creates a visible boundary of condensation, just briefly. Then the body steps outside. The RV sits altered, snow accumulated through darkness. Inches became feet in wind-gathered drifts. The vehicle's shape remains recognizable, but softened, rounded. White covers the roof entirely, hangs from the awning mount, piles against tires. The rectangular human structure became something more organic, a snow sculpture sharing qualities with surrounding drifts. Footsteps create the first marks. They sink, compress layers. The sound arrives as squeaking when cold makes snow particularly dry. No other tracks exist here. Nothing moved near the RV through the night. Only wind, only falling snow. Further out, the landscape transformed completely. Trees that showed dark bark yesterday wear white sleeves now. Branches bend under weight, some heavily laden, some relieved by wind that stripped accumulation during gusts. The spaces between trees filled with unmarked powder, pristine. The word applies literally. Steam rises from the heating vent on the RV's side. Warm exhaust meets cold air. Creates visible proof of systems working, of warmth maintained inside while cold reigned outside. The small cloud lifts, dissipates, reforms with each furnace cycle. Across the campground, other RVs show similar transformation. Same snow coverage, same softening of angles, but each also shows steam. Each contains warmth. Each sheltered someone through the same storm. Parallel experiences. Individual but simultaneous. No one emerges yet from those other spaces. Morning moves slowly after a winter night, especially after a storm. The cold makes people reluctant. The beauty makes them patient. There will be time later for shared acknowledgement, for brief conversations confirming everyone fared well, for stories about how the wind sounded or when the snow seemed heaviest. For now, the solitude feels appropriate. Each traveler exists in their own mourning, their own assessment, their own quiet appreciation. The sun angles through trees, if sun appears at all. Light behaves differently after snowfall, brighter, reflected. Everything becomes a surface for illumination. Even under clouds, the world seems less dark than before the storm. Wildlife tracks might appear in open areas. Rabbits moving between shelters, deer passing through, birds landing and departing. These marks in snow tell stories of other creatures who shared the night, who faced the same cold, who survived through different strategies but equal determination. The air smells clean. Cold strips away other scents. Snow muffles sounds. Wind died down to stillness or near stillness. The acoustic environment changed entirely from the night's activity. What was loud became quiet. What moved became still. Standing outside the RV, the relationship between inside and outside becomes visible. The thin walls that seem so inadequate in concept prove adequate in practice. Warmth stayed in. Cold stayed out. The barrier held, not perfectly, but sufficiently. The morning routine will continue. snow clearing, system checks, plans for the day adjusted to account for road conditions. But this moment, stepping into the transformed landscape, serves a different purpose. It confirms participation in something larger. The storm didn't happen elsewhere while travelers watched from windows. They existed within it, slept through it, maintained their small sphere of warmth while surrounded by cold. And now they witness the aftermath, the proof, the accumulation that measures the night's intensity. This view will exist only briefly. Sun will settle snow. Wind may redistribute it. Plows might clear paths. Other vehicles will add tracks. The pristine quality lasts only minutes after dawn. But for now, it holds, white and quiet and clean, evidence of what the night brought. Confirmation of what travelers weathered. The landscape speaks in accumulation and absence, in depth and drift, in stillness. Each successful night builds something beyond rest. When morning arrives and the furnace quiets and blankets are folded back, there remains a quiet satisfaction that has nothing to do with comfort alone. It comes from having slept well despite conditions that suggested otherwise, from cold outside and warmth inside, maintained through attention and preparation, from systems that worked because they were understood and managed properly. Winter RV travelers return season after season, not because the experience is easy, but because it demands competence. Each evening's preparation, checking propane, positioning vents, layering bedding, becomes a problem solved rather than a burden carried. The first winter teaches through trial. The furnace cycles differently than expected. Condensation appears where it wasn't anticipated. Morning reveals what worked and what needs adjustment. But the second winter benefits from that knowledge, and the third winter refines it further. Confidence accumulates across nights. The thermostat setting that maintains sleep without waking becomes familiar. The blanket combination that provides warmth without overheating gets calibrated through experience. The sound of wind that signals minor inconvenience versus genuine concern becomes distinguishable. What felt uncertain during early attempts becomes routine through repetition. Not thoughtless routine, but practiced attention that requires less conscious effort. Self-reliance carries its own reward. When morning arrives after a storm and the RV interior remains warm and dry, there exists proof of capability. The propane lasted because calculations were correct, the bedding performed because layering was appropriate, the systems operated because maintenance was adequate. No outside help arrived, none was needed. That independence, confirmed night after night, creates satisfaction that transcends the specific act of sleeping. The challenges themselves become part of the appeal rather than obstacles overcome. Preparing for cold weather transforms from anxiety into engagement. The effort required to maintain comfort stops feeling like hardship and starts feeling like purpose. Winter itself shifts from something to escape into something to inhabit deliberately. The returning travelers aren't seeking difficulty for its own sake. They're seeking the particular contentment that comes from meeting difficulty successfully. Many winter RV travelers report sleeping better than they do in traditional homes. Not occasionally, regularly. The statement seems to contradict everything about thin walls and furnace noise and temperature management, but the contradiction resolves when the factors are examined separately. Darkness arrives completely. RVs parked in winter campgrounds or remote locations experience an absence of light pollution that urban and suburban homes never achieve. No streetlights, no neighbors' windows, no ambient glow from nearby commercial areas. When curtains close and lights switch off, the darkness is absolute. The kind of darkness human eyes adapted to expect before electric lighting made it rare. Quiet follows different rules. Yes, the furnace cycles. Yes, wind moves against walls. But the background hum of modern life, traffic, HVAC systems, appliances in other rooms, sounds from adjacent properties, disappears. The mechanical sounds that do exist are localized and rhythmic, predictable. And many sleepers find that steady mechanical rhythm less disruptive than random environmental noise. Fresh air enters despite cold outside. The ventilation required for condensation. Management and propane appliance safety means windows stay cracked and vents remain open. Cold air streams in, but it's genuinely fresh rather than recirculated. Not climate-controlled sterile air pushed through ducts and filters, but outside air carrying the particular crispness of winter. For many, that makes breathing easier and sleep deeper. The bedding creates a cocoon effect, multiple layers of blankets and quilts, sleeping bags left partially open, heated blankets on lower settings. All of it adds weight and compression. Not oppressive weight, but substantial presence. Research on weighted blankets suggests this pressure reduces anxiety and improves sleep quality. Winter RV bedding provides that same effect naturally, out of necessity rather than intention. Environmental simplicity reduces mental clutter. The RV contains limited possessions. The sleeping space offers few choices about arrangement or activity. The evening narrows to simple routines without complexity or decision fatigue. Reading, resting, sleeping. Nothing else competes for attention because nothing else fits. That enforced minimalism creates mental quiet that climate-controlled homes with their multiple rooms and endless options often prevent. Physical tiredness accumulates differently. Winter activities, even just moving through cold air, maintaining systems, performing simple tasks in heavy clothing, require more energy than the same activities in moderate weather. Bodies arrive at evening genuinely tired rather than just mentally exhausted. Sleep comes more easily when physical fatigue supports it. The counterintuitive truth stands. Many winter RV travelers sleep better, precisely because of factors that seem like they should prevent rest. The cold outside makes the warm cocoon more satisfying. The small space makes the environment more controllable. The mechanical sounds provide steady rhythm rather than disruption. The necessary ventilation improves air quality. The simplicity removes mental obstacles. And morning after morning, the experience confirms itself. Sleeping through snowstorms in an RV creates a relationship with winter that climate-controlled homes don't allow. The experience builds awareness, not intellectual understanding, but physical knowledge gained through nights spent separated from freezing air by inches of insulation and propane heat. Weather becomes personal when it determines comfort. Morning routines depend on overnight temperatures. Evening preparations change with storm forecasts. The thin walls that make RVs vulnerable also make them sensitive. Barometers that register every shift in wind and precipitation through sound and temperature. Travelers learn to read conditions not from apps, but from how their sleeping space responds. This creates memories tied to specific places and storms. Not abstract recollections, but embodied experiences. The night it snowed 16 inches in Montana and the furnace cycled every 12 minutes. The evening in Wyoming when wind rocked the RV but warmth held inside layered bedding. The morning in Colorado when frost patterns on windows created landscapes of ice. The seasons stop being background. They become the structure around which life organizes. Winter isn't endured or fled. It's engaged directly, night after night, through the simple act of staying warm enough to sleep. This immediacy builds something that insulated distance prevents. Connection. Not romantic appreciation, but practical relationship developed through repeated problem solving and successful comfort despite challenging conditions. The evening preparation routine becomes more than practical necessity. It transforms into meditative practice, the checking of propane levels, the adjustment of thermostats, the arrangement of bedding layers, the crack of ventilation despite cold outside. These actions carry weight beyond their function. They represent competence, knowledge accumulated through experience, systems understood and managed successfully. Each task completed moves the traveler closer to the security of a warm night, despite the storm building outside. Pride develops in getting it right, in waking comfortable rather than cold, in maintaining warmth through the darkest hours without intervention, in creating rest despite conditions that would seem to prevent it. The challenges themselves become part of the appeal, not obstacles to overcome on the way to some other goal, but the substance of the experience itself. the tightening of a propane connection, the strategic placement of a heated blanket, the precise calibration of ventilation that balances warmth and air quality. Stories emerge from these nights, shared among winter RV communities with the satisfaction of problems solved. Remember that storm. Remember how the wind tested every seal. Remember waking warm anyway. The ritual delivers its own reward. Not comfort despite effort, but comfort because of engagement. The kind of rest that comes from successfully managing every detail that determines whether sleep will be peaceful or restless. Morning light filters through frost-covered windows. Another winter night has passed successfully. Outside, fresh snow blankets the landscape. Inside, small rituals continue, checking propane levels, assessing battery state, planning the day ahead. The furnace cycles one more time. Steam rises from heating vents into cold air. It is proof that home and comfort can be created anywhere, even in the smallest spaces during the coldest storms. The road waits. So does another night. And travelers who have learned to sleep warm through winter know they will be ready when it comes.